Our story begins with one of the bad endings from that game where the girl is no simple villainess. In a world that fell into despair, she wanted to destroy it all. The world's mid-level boss, the Witch of Calamity, Yon Hanul. In the scenario where they fail to kill her, every being in the world will cease to exist, leading to the bad ending. On a sunny, ordinary spring day, a new semester was beginning in a 5th grade elementary class. The teacher announced the arrival of a new student. That mundane, everyday life crumbled all too soon. Our protagonist noticed that their new classmate had an insanely faint blue color, a round rabbit tail, and long rabbit ears held high on her head. The kid then introduced herself as Yon Hanul. That day, after observing his new classmate and hearing her share her hobbies, reading, listening to music, and dramas, he remembered his past life. However, there was no reason for him to dwell on nostalgia, since standing in front of him was someone with a more mature voice than before. When she expressed her hope for them to get along, he remembered the witch stating that such a rotten world is better off disappearing. This made him certain that the Witch of Calamity who brought the world to an end was in front of him, the mid-level boss, Yon Hanul. He was so certain that he couldn't deny it even if he wanted to and thought that they were doomed. Brave Hearts is a game that our protagonist used to enjoy in his past life. It was about a boy dreaming of becoming the best hunter, the fighting spirit's apprentice, Kang Hanbyul. This school action RPG game, set 200 years after a cataclysm, features monsters and hunters in a world where science and magic coexist. To become a hunter, our protagonist enrolls in Joomgang Academy, located in Education Town, and encounters multiple scenarios. Until that point, it resembled a stereotypical youth school life plot. But the story wasn't all that bright because the game had as many as 44 endings, most of which were world collapse scenarios. Braveheart had one more significant problem. It featured a soft-hearted and cowardly swordsman character who could never fully demonstrate his abilities. Completely useless and annoying, he would flee during battles. An innocent boy who doesn't know how to hate, and even when bullied, he remained a frustrating crybaby who never thought to defend himself, the bane of the protagonist's party. That character is our protagonist, the Rabbit of the Divine Sword Arts, Du Kyunwoo. Our protagonist wonders why he has to be such a problematic character if he was reincarnated. As if that weren't enough, he ended up in the same class as that dangerous character. He cries under his desk, thinking that no matter how hard he tries, it is beyond his abilities. Suddenly, their teacher called him, which shocked him. Tearingly, he looks at Yon Hanul, who was standing shyly. He knows that Hanul, who became the Witch of Calamity in the game, was a character who seemed to bear the suffering of the whole world. Abandoned by her parents at birth, ridiculed and regarded as an eyesore, she received not an ounce of affection from others, leading to a lonely and weary life. All of it happened due to a mana disaster, and being born with mutated DNA, she was an Aeon. He remembered hearing that an Aeon's appearance and DNA do not match their parents, but he was convinced that abandoning Hanul was too cruel, helping him understand why Hanul became the Witch of Calamity. However, he knows he can't sit by and let the world's downfall happen. He thinks the easiest solution would be to eliminate Hanul before she becomes a calamity, but he doesn't want to resort to that, making him wonder if there is any other way. He then gets an idea. His teacher then tells him to choose a classmate he wants to sit next to, and do so if they agree. This directive makes him think that he must change Hanul's way of thinking. As he walks towards her, he remembers that Hanul's unfortunate circumstances and environment led her to resent the world. However, if it was now, a time when the game's story hasn't begun, his actions could potentially change the future. He knows that among the villains of the game, Yon Hanul possesses the ability to destroy the world. He greets her, and she looks at him confusedly while he is busy thinking that he will help Hanul not to be pessimistic about the world. He then asks her if he can sit next to her, thinking that if it progresses and he brings her to his side, he can reinforce his strength. She is confused and stutteringly asks if he is talking to her. He knows there are 5 years left until the start of the game's story, so before enrolling in the academy, he has decided to become friends with Yon Hanul. By guiding her to the right path, he hopes to turn her from a calamity into a blessing. He grabs the chair next to her and sits down, smilingly telling her that she will be his partner from today onwards, and that she should take care of him. He then introduces himself to her as Du Kyunwoo, and that's how Kyunwoo became the childhood friend of the mid-level boss. When their classes ended, he stared at her as she picked up her bag, wondering how he could get closer to her. She asked him if he could stop looking at her, to which he apologized, embarrassed, wondering if he had stared at her for too long. As she walked away, he once again stared at her, thinking he should stop overthinking and just directly ask her to come to his house. However, he then noticed her small tail, and when she stutteringly called him, he jumped a little in shock and asked what it was. She walked closer to him and he asked what was wrong, but instead, she questioned why he was sitting next to her. He replied that it was because he wanted to be friends with her. She was stunned upon hearing his answer and shyly asked why he wanted to be friends with her. He responded that he just wanted to be friends, asking what else it could be, noticing that her ears popped up. She stutteringly expressed confusion about why he wanted to be friends with someone like her, especially since he was from a famous swordsmanship family. He silently stared at Hanul, who seemed sad. Then, remembering something, he happily shouted Mongshil to her, telling her that she was as cute as a rabbit he once had and that he really liked rabbits. She resembled one of them. She shook upon hearing this and, with a flushed face, shouted that she was not a rabbit. She then ran to the door, making him wonder if his comment had upset her, but he immediately apologized. Before she exited the door, she stopped and stutteringly told him that she would see him tomorrow. She then ran away, leaving him relieved that she wasn't angry with him. A moment later, as he walked down the street, he couldn't believe that he had entered the world of the game. He wondered why he couldn't see his status window if the world was still a game. He then checked behind him and shouted, "Status window." Suddenly, the system popped up in front of him, and he decided to take a closer look. He was then surprised to see that Du Kyunwoo's abilities were quite impressive for his young age, with physical strength at 37, muscle strength at 34, endurance at 32, agility at 43, mana at 30, and luck at 25. Convinced that his abilities were actually quite good, he wondered why Kyunwoo was constantly bullied with such capabilities, but he acknowledged that it was a fresh start, far superior to his previous life. A moment later, he arrived at his mansion and upon entering, shouted, "I'm home." The lady of the house greeted him along with the maid and asked how school was and if everything was okay. He was stunned to see the lady, but rushed to hug her. She asked worriedly what was wrong. He knew that he was not living his past life, nor should he think he was living in a game, so he decided he should fully embrace his life as Du Kyunwoo. He then told the lady it was nothing and that he just felt grateful to have her. She advised him that if something happened, he should tell her, and instructed him to wash up and that she would prepare a snack before he headed to the sword training academy. He replied okay and ran to his room, walking upstairs knowing that he needed to embrace his role as Du Kyunwoo. What he needed most right now was to master the Beast King style, a sword technique that represented a prestigious swordsmanship family like his. Like a lion reigning over all the beasts, this technique was focused at the tip of the sword and was also the technique that made Kyunwoo the greatest swordsman. He then called for Mongshil, his male rabbit. Getting closer, he took the rabbit out of its cage, noticing that Mongshil resembled Hanul. He thought to himself that he should completely master the Beast King style. A moment later, in the training room, he noticed there were few people around and realized he was early. He knew that these sword training academies operated in several cities, and people outside the family learned conventional swordsmanship, not the Beast King style, which was why so many attended the training academy. He wondered why everyone stopped what they were doing and looked in the same direction. There, he saw Du Xian, the Du family's sword deity, known as Lightning Flower, 2 years his senior and the most promising prodigy among all the current Du family children. In the game, Xian is a student at Jumgang Academy who becomes the strongest swordsman after graduation, and a strong ally of Du Kyunwoo. He pondered why Xian was there, but realized that, being a sword training academy of the Du family, it wasn't unusual for her to be present. He hung up his shirt, knowing they would soon see each other often, and decided to focus on practicing the Beast King style. He grabbed the training sword and began. Positioning himself, he swung his sword and executed the Beast King style's first form, counting each repetition until he reached 10. He paused, wondering if Xian would be impressed by his practice, enjoying the sweat and fun of the exercise, when he suddenly heard someone asking, "Who is that?" One kid derisively inquired what was wrong with him, while another teasingly asked if a rabbit was now practicing too. He then saw Wu Jundong, who was eating, questioning if it was really the rabbit, Wu Yundong asking why he was there so early, and Wu Dongdong questioning whether he could use his skills in a real fight and betting that he couldn't catch even one rabbit. He knew these 3 identical triplets were the extra characters called the Cerberus in the game, and they were the kids who bullied him, spurred on by his cousin Du Seungwoo's influence. Frustrated by their presence, he realized it was the first time he couldn't focus due to their teasing. One of the triplets pressed him on why he wasn't responding. He understood that their taunts weren't the only reason he couldn't concentrate. He was also angry at himself for allowing the bullying. He remembered everything that happened to Kyunwoo in his past life and questioned why he had never fought back against their harassment. The triplets had once hurt him, telling him that the head of the Du family must be ashamed of him, that he was a disgrace to the family, and that they felt sorry for his parents. This memory reminded him that he hated hurting people. Dongdong mockingly asked what the point of swinging his sword was. He also suggested they should become his sparring partners, with Yundong teasingly offering their help. Knowing the human body is not weak at all, Kyunwoo told them they should spar lightly as if it were a real game. A moment later, the other kids were in shock when he executed his Beast King-style technique, the charging stance, and struck Jumdong in the stomach. Jumdong was thrown back, and Dongdong, worried, called out to him, noting that his nose was bleeding. Yundong stutteringly asked what was wrong with him. Dizzy, Jumdong told his brothers that he couldn't see well. Angrily, he questioned Jumdong if he expected to be the end. He then urged them to quickly pick up his swords and stand up. Dongdong, who was checking on his brother, remarked that Kyunwoo was quite weird, while Yundong was horrified, telling his brothers that Kyunwoo had changed. He reassured them not to exaggerate and to stand up because people don't die from that much. Kyunwoo then reminded them that he, who had been hit by them in the past, could assert this. Yundong shouted, asking why he was doing this to them and if he was crazy. Yundong then reminded him that they had powerful backing and questioned if he thought he'd let this slide. Hyunwoo coolly asked if they were referring to his cousin, Do Seungwoo, and if they thought Seungwoo would protect them. The triplets were shocked when they heard this and remembered a time on the street when they shouted about becoming hunters, and Seungwoo told them that the fees for hunter education were too high and realistically speaking, it was unreasonable. Jumdong mentioned that they heard talents are sponsored, and Dongdong excitedly asked if that meant the fees would be free. Seungwoo had asked them if they wanted to get sponsored, to which they all agreed. Seungwoo then told them that he would handle it and that it was nothing difficult. However, he noted that they were in the same school as Kyunwoo, which meant they would see Kyunwoo often. Kyunwoo then told the triplets that he had just been letting himself get bullied before, and it also seemed they had forgotten that he was part of the Do family too, which meant it was easy for him to remove them from his family's sponsoring list if he chose to. He then asked them if they really thought that Seungwoo was the only one who could do it. The triplets were horrified, wondering how things had turned out this way. Suddenly, their teacher called them punks and demanded to know what they were doing and how many times he needed to tell them not to spar without permission. The teacher then told him that even if he was not a model member of the Do family, he shouldn't be fighting, but Kyunwoo simply pointed to the triplets and replied that they started it first. This left the teacher confused, but Kyunwoo asked if he was expected to just stay still and endure their bullying when he was a Do just as much as they were. The teacher then asked the triplets if they really had been picking on Kyunwoo. Initially stunned, they glanced away to think, and then all admitted that they had started it. Confirming that Kyunwoo was right, they had cursed at him, and Kyunwoo was not at fault. This left the teacher looking at them confusedly, while Kyunwoo, feeling refreshed from the admission, thought to himself that he should have stood up for himself earlier. The next day, he arrived at school and walked into the classroom, wondering if he had arrived too early. He then looked to his side and saw Hanwoo alone, deeply engrossed in her book. He stared at her for a moment and greeted her. She shyly covered her face with the book and greeted him back. He then sat next to her, determined to try his best to befriend Hanwoo that day. He commented that she was early every day and always reading books, then asked if she really liked reading that much. She replied yes and asked him if he liked reading too. He responded that he was not really into books, but more into web novels, which confused her. When she asked why he joined the book club, he replied that it was because she had signed up. She said she understood, but then shyly asked him to repeat what he said. He playfully asked if she read web novels too. She stutteringly admitted yes, but explained that she didn't have much pocket money, so she could only read the free ones. Remembering that she lived in an orphanage, he decided to change the topic to avoid offending her, and asked what drama she liked. She replied that she enjoyed the drama Luxury House, and asked him how he knew she liked dramas. He reminded her that she had mentioned it during her introduction. Surprised that he remembered, she wondered why he was talking to her and if it was because he didn't have any friends either. She suspected that Kyunwoo was only fascinated because she was an Ain and feared that he too would eventually lose interest. Seeing her become downcast at the thought, he noticed her ears and wondered if she would mind if he asked to touch them. He then realized she really resembled Mongshul and got an idea. He asked her if she wanted to see a video of Mongshul, and when she asked if that was his rabbit, he told her he had taken a cute video of Mongshul the day before. She expressed interest in seeing it, and he showed her the video, explaining that when rabbits are in a good mood, they jump around excitedly in what is called a binky. She was amazed to see it and commented on how cute Mongshul was. He noticed her rabbit ears stand up again, so he asked her if she wanted to come to his house to see Mongshul. She immediately replied yes, but then hesitated when she realized what she had agreed to. He then raised his little finger as a promise and suggested they play at his house after school. His face turned red as tomatoes, and she thought she should refuse because she didn't want to relive past negative experiences. But after school, she was amazed and surprised when she saw his house, remarking that it was like the one in Luxury House, the drama she watched. Kyunwoo's mother then came out and asked Hanwoo if she was Kyunwoo's friend, welcoming her warmly. Kyunwoo greeted his mother happily, while Hanwoo was in shock, remembering how her old friend's parents had told them not to play with Ains and warned her not to just befriend anyone. Kyunwoo's mother told Hanul that it was the first time Kyunwoo had brought a friend over and expressed how happy she was, encouraging her to have fun. Kyunwoo then asked his mother if she could make them tteokbokki, to which his mother happily agreed. He grabbed Hanul's hand and urged her to come in quickly, despite knowing that Kyunwoo's curiosity might not last. Hanul still didn't want to let go of his hand. Inside, she was shocked to see that his house was incredibly spacious. They then ate tteokbokki together and played with Mongshil, which made her very happy. Hours later, Kyunwoo's father came home and announced cheerfully that he was back. Kyunwoo's mother mentioned that he was a bit late today, and Kyunwoo greeted his father, who acknowledged his tardiness and asked why Yi-yoon was rolling on the floor crying earlier, upset that she wanted to see her rabbit sister too. Kyunwoo explained that his friend had come over today, but Yi-yoon wasn't home, which is why she was upset. Kyunwoo then approached his father and asked if they could spar after dinner. His father was initially surprised but then excitedly said he had been wondering when he'd get to play with him, especially now that he was in 5th grade. Kyunwoo expressed his desire to see how much he had improved and also to experience actual combat. His father, taken aback, asked if he really meant actual combat, to which Kyunwoo replied yes and added that he'd like to face some real monsters. A moment later, his father asked him why he suddenly wanted to spar and told him that he didn't need to be impatient because it was not yet his time to face the real thing. His father also inquired about his motivations. Kyunwoo looked at his hand, knowing that in 5 years, he would enter the Do Family Sword Academy headquarters and inevitably face crises while solving various incidents alongside the protagonist, Kang Hanbyul. For this, he needed a good grasp of actual combat. He was sure that the other kids in the Do family had already gained their combat experience, and he was far behind them, so he knew he needed to catch up now. When he didn't answer, his father looked at him and asked if it was because of the incident at the Sword Training Academy just now. His father then seriously told him that he heard about the fight at the academy, and that the kid he fought was seriously injured. However, he reassured Kyunwoo that he had done nothing wrong. Shocked upon hearing this, Kyunwoo saw that his father seemed more interested in the truth than in scolding him, but he knew that he would never fight without reason. He then replied that he had been taught from a young age that the sword from the divine swordsmanship of the Do family was meant to protect and save people, and he had taken that lesson to heart. He believed that he wouldn't have this notion if he hadn't reflected on his past life and the lessons from it, and thinking about the future had changed his mindset. He then asked his father if he shouldn't be able to protect himself and how someone who can't protect themselves could protect others. His father asked if that was the reason he fought, to which he confidently replied yes and explained that he could protect not only himself but others as well, and for that, he needed to face real monsters. His father smiled upon hearing his answer and told him that he was not wrong and his reasoning was completely valid. His father then patted his head and told him that he had changed a lot. He asked his father if he would help him, to which his father replied that he would, but there was a condition. He asked his father what it was. His father pointed the training sword at him and told him to prove that he had developed enough skill to face a real monster. His father then said he wouldn't use mana and wouldn't move more than 5 steps, so he should feel free to pounce. He asked his father about using the Beast King style, and his father replied that he would only use the basics, to which he responded that he understood. He hesitated about the conditions set by his father but was glad that his father told him not to hesitate to use the sword if necessary. His father then teasingly told him to attack, and he decided to do exactly as his father instructed. He exhaled to calm himself and positioned his training sword. He then swung his sword at his father, who easily blocked it without moving, causing him to be thrown off balance a little, but he managed to land perfectly. He then bent his knees, jumped high, and launched another attack on his father, but his father blocked it again. His father then pushed him slightly away and told him that it wasn't going to work, but he immediately launched his sword without going down and swung at his father, who jumped away to dodge it. When he saw his father just land, he knew it was the right time, so he immediately launched an attack again, but his father blocked it. As his father began to speak, telling him that he was going to use it, he struck his father on the side without letting his father finish his words. His father looked at his side, seeing that he had managed to hit him. His father then jumped away, holding his side in pain, and called him a brat, telling him that he had allowed the hit, but that it was really hard. Exhausted, he asked his father if he could acknowledge his ability, but his father just told him that he had really grown up and didn't even hesitate to hit his own father. He laughed and asked if he passed, to which his father shouted affirmatively, of course, calling him a rude brat. The next morning, his father told his mother that they would be leaving and would probably return home before dinner. His mother worriedly asked if he was sure about sending Kyunwoo there, questioning if Kyunwoo was too young, and if it wasn't too early for him, while Yi-yoon shouted that she wanted to go too. He and his father were both stunned upon hearing his mother and sister. His father then told his mother that he thought it would be fine, to which he agreed. His mother then told him to be careful and not to overdo it, to which he replied affirmatively, telling his mother not to worry because he would be back later. They entered the car, and his father asked him if he was ready, suggesting they head to the clan academy, to which he replied affirmatively. His father then started driving. He remembered that, according to the game settings, the world had become dramatically unstable since the time of the Calamity change, heavily influencing the world. This instability began as monsters started pouring out from the distorted dimension, leading to a dungeon being transformed on the other side. In that process, when the distorted dimensions of different worlds meet, a gate is created. He knew that if this phenomenon wasn't resolved in time, the world inside the gate would explode and scatter into reality. An outbreak is a phenomenon where the world in the gate explodes and scatters out. It differs from dungeons, and if they fail to conquer it within the time limit, it will significantly impact the ending. He knew that to reach the desired ending, they also needed to pay attention to the gate erosion rate, which was necessary for character growth as well. His thoughts were interrupted when his father told him that they should grab the key first after arriving. He asked his father where the gate key was, and his father replied that it was kept in the warehouse. He knew that once they cleared a gate, they obtained a gate key with which they could clear it again, a feature created by the game developers for players who wanted to re-clear the gate. He pondered whether this setting was still in function after his reincarnation. A moment later, his father stopped the car and told him that they had arrived. They got out, and his father introduced him to his workplace, the Regulus clan. The Regulus clan was established during the catastrophe by the first head of the Du family. It now has several branches across the country. Access to the dungeon gates and monster habitats, managed by the government, normally requires a hunter's certificate. He knows that since he doesn't possess a certificate yet, he shouldn't be able to enter the gate. However, his father, who is the branch manager, is greeted warmly by the employees, making his situation within the clan unique. He thinks he doesn't need to adhere strictly to those restrictions and, with his father's help, can just go through the gate that is kept by the clan. Suddenly, he heard someone shout excitedly, and a hand grabbed him. A lady then hugged him, asking if he was their manager's son, while the other employees surrounded him, glad that he looked all innocent, a good thing he didn't take after his father. One employee began to pinch his cheeks, telling him how cute he was and that they wanted to hug him with all their might. A moment later, he was showered with kisses by the employee hunters when the lady asked his father if he intended to enter the gate with his son, leaving him wondering if all the hunters were so affectionate. The lady then tells his father that they shall access room 2 as planned, and his father tells him that they should go. However, he is confused when he sees the key and asks his father why the key he just received is white. He remembers that the gate's levels of difficulty are differentiated by 7 different key colors, starting from the easiest level, white, followed by gray, yellow, green, red, blue, and the most difficult, black. His father tells him that white will be challenging enough for him, to which he replies that he understands, but truthfully, he wants to attempt the gray level. His father then opens the gate and tells him that they should go in. He then saw another gate inside, and his father explained that it was an artificial gate, and that if he inserted the key obtained by clearing a dungeon there, the gate would open. He was amazed to see it and remembered that they could upkeep a large clan thanks to the maintenance costs, realizing how powerful his family was. His father then called him over seriously to tell him that they were going to enter the gate now and asked if he was sure he was ready. His father advised him to think it through again because once they were in there, they could not leave until they had cleared the dungeon. He silently looked at his father for a moment and confidently replied that he had given it enough thought already. His father smiled worriedly at him, but before inserting the key, he asked his father if he would intervene if he was unable to clear it. His father replied that even if he failed, he would have his back, so he shouldn't overdo it and make him get scolded by his mother. His father then inserted the key and activated the gate. The gate slowly opened, and as he entered, he saw crystals everywhere, shining brightly. He looked around in amazement. It was his first time entering a gate, and then the system popped up, showing him that he had entered the White Level's Pink Crystal Cave, and his mission was to eliminate 15 goblins ranked 0.1. As he read the system, he wondered if the conditions for clearing were simple because it was a white level gate, and asked where the goblins might be. Suddenly, he heard a sound behind him, quickly drew his sword, and positioned himself while holding the real sword, knowing it was dangerous and he should be cautious. He then waited, staying on guard so he wouldn't be taken by surprise. He was then surprised to see his father in front with the goblins tied up. He ran to his father and asked if he had captured all the goblins. His father replied that they were all there. He counted the goblins and confirmed there were 15 in total. He calmed himself down and told his father he was ready. His father said they should begin then, and since he couldn't handle them all at once, they should start with one. His father walked towards the smallest goblin, telling him it might be the weakest of the group but he shouldn't be careless and must stay alert. But before his father could finish his sentence, the goblin freed itself in anger, surprising his father a little. The goblin then rushed at him while he asked his father if he was referring to the fact that they are fierce, to which his father agreed and reminded him not to forget it. He knew that he possessed knowledge from games, but as a member of the Divine Swordsmanship Du family, he also held knowledge about monsters, and he thought these creatures must have understood that their only chance to survive was to fight him. The goblin then grabbed a sharp crystal, making him realize it was desperate enough to use a crystal as a weapon, and he knew he had to be cautious because a small mistake could be disastrous. He then bent down, thinking that since it was an actual fight, he should put in his everything. He then activated his Beast King style basic technique, 5th form piercing stance, and thrust his sword at the goblin's head. He pierced his sword into its head, and the goblin kneeled on the ground. The goblin then lay on the ground dead, causing his father to sigh in relief. He tightly grasped his sword and proudly declared that one was down for now. As a party member of the main character, Kang Hanbiul, Du Kyunwoo has one restriction. There is a feature called Gift in the game, and among the passive skills that define the character, Du Kyunwoo's gift is Evasion Instinct. At first glance, it seems like a useful ability. His father then released 2 goblins, and as they faced him, he contemplated that Evasion Instinct is literally the ability to move one's body instinctively to avoid attacks when sensing a life-threatening crisis. While it appeared to be a useful ability for Du Kyunwoo, who wields a sword, his fearful and fragile character often leads him to disobey commands, causing the gift to be rejected. Due to this gift, players generally did not include Du Kyunwoo in their party unless it was unavoidable. The Evasion Instinct also caused Kyunwoo to defy player commands, leading to frustration. However, there is an event in the story that triggers Kyunwoo's awakening. Later in the narrative, Kyunwoo gains control over his gift after the awakening. A character who awakens late becomes a remarkably strong morale booster, and later, Kyunwoo demonstrates his overwhelming ability to defeat enemies by avoiding most of their attacks. He remembers that it was said raising Kyunwoo well could make the later part of the game easier, but he knows it is still a long way off, and if he does nothing but wait, it'll be too late. So, he couldn't just sit still and wait. The goblins growled at him in anger, and he stared back at them, knowing he needed to advance his awakening. He knew it might be impossible if it was just a game, but for him, it was reality. He then remembered that when he played the game, he didn't find any situation that triggered the awakening in the later part of the story, so he thought it must not be hard to awaken early. He then jumped closer to the goblins and swung his sword, determined to push himself to the limit. Later, many goblins lay dead on the ground, but he told his father to release the next one. His father suggested they take a rest, but he replied that if it was only to that extent, he was fine. His father sighed and said that if he insisted, they should face all of them while the last 4 goblins stared at him in anger. His father then released them all and the goblins rushed at him, but they all jumped behind him, catching him off guard. He looked around, wondering if it was a diversion tactic, and noticed that 2 of the goblins were above him, but he couldn't locate the other 2. Suddenly, he felt something approaching from behind. He let his body react for a moment, and his gift, Evasion Instinct, swiftly moved him to the side. Then, something from behind tried to hit him, but he avoided it, and it struck the crystal in front instead. He was stunned in horror when he realized that his body had moved without his conscious will, indicating that his gift had activated. Knowing that the Evasion Instinct had sensed the crisis, he resolved to trust that instinct. He then positioned his feet, ready to deal with the goblins first. Thanks to his gift, he managed to spot where the 4 goblins were hiding and swore he wouldn't fall for their trick again. One of the goblins threw another crystal from behind, but he reassured himself it was fine since his evasion instinct was activated. He dodged the crystal, shocking the goblin who threw it. He then jumped, using the crystal to reach one of the goblins trying to hit him with arrows. He slashed the goblin in half with his Beast King style basic 2nd form attack stance, but was surprised when he looked behind and saw the goblins waiting for him at his intended landing spot with a sharp crystal. He then compressed and rotated the mana within his body, loading the mana that emerged from his heart into his sword, now wrapped by mana. He swung his sword with his Beast King style 1st form Lion Crush cut and successfully slashed the 2 goblins waiting for his landing. He then safely landed on the ground and asked if only one was left, shouting that he'd go straight for it. However, his father told him there was no need to rush and asked what if he got hurt, but he replied that it was okay because he believed he could handle it. His father warned him to be careful since it was the last one and he should be more cautious. He agreed and headed toward the last goblin. A moment later, his father silently watched him, deciding to trust in his son while observing the piles of dead goblins he had slain. He was catching his breath when his father called out to him. The system then displayed that he had cleared the gate and that an exit gate would be generated where the gate key would appear. It also warned that the gate would close in 24 hours. Then, a bright circle of light appeared above them, and within it was the key. The key then landed in his palm, and he saw that it was the same white key they had used. He clenched his teeth and cursed inwardly. His father laughingly asked what was with his face and if he didn't believe that he had cleared the gate. He just called to his father, who responded with a smile and pride. But he merely asked his father if there were any other gates. He then realized that he couldn't use that dungeon for practice until the cooldown was over. As the gate closed, the power inside it was depleted. But he knew that the gate would become active again after replenishing its mana. This made him wonder what he should do next since he hadn't awakened his gift yet. His thoughts were interrupted when his father, Sangjun, told him that he was very surprised and had thought he would stop after 4 goblins, but in the end, he managed to defeat 5 of them easily. Sangjun then shook him while proudly asking, "Whose son are you?" and told him that there was nothing left to do there, so they should clean up and go home. Sangjun headed to the exit and asked for the key, but he hesitantly called out to Sangjun and asked if there was any other gate, leaving Sangjun looking at him confused. He explained that he felt like he was about to awaken his gift and it would be a pity to go back just like that. He asked Sangjun if they shouldn't try clearing another gate if there was enough time left. Sangjun asked him if he just said he seemed to have awakened, to which he replied yes, and suggested that they should do something more challenging. He told Sangjun that he thinks they'll be okay to enter a great grade gate, and that he can now handle 2-rank monsters. Sangjun, looking serious, reminded him that his mother, Jaya, would be furious if she knew he allowed such a thing. Nonetheless, he insisted that everyone will die eventually, prompting Sangjun to question if he really was his son. Sangjun then acknowledged his desire to push himself but warned that fighting a 2-rank monster was too much for him at the moment. However, if it was a white grade gate, it would be fine. He asked Sangjun if that was really what he thought, and Sangjun paused to think before agreeing. He told him that as a swordsman, he understood what he meant, but if he became too ambiguous, he wouldn't achieve anything, which made him happy. He thanked his father, but Sangjun just reminded him that he would step in whenever he was in danger. They then headed to the white grade gate, and he realized that not all white grade gates were the same. Sangjun warned him that it was going to be tough and that he had brought support just in case, pointing to the man who greeted them. He knew that the support consisted of dungeon-specialized magic supporting hunters, who typically used healing or buffs to assist hunters. Sangjun warned him to be cautious, as monsters might rush them immediately after entering the dungeon. Sangjun then asked if he was ready to go, to which he confidently replied yes. They then entered the gate, and the system notified him that he had entered the white grade gate, Pink Crystal Cave, and his mission was to subjugate 15 monster goblins of 1 rank. He looked around and realized it was the same world where he had fought earlier. He was wondering where the monsters were when he felt something approaching and managed to dodge it just in time. Horrified, he wondered what had just happened, but then the system alerted him that numerous monsters had appeared. 4 normal goblins, 7 swordsman goblins, 3 archer goblins, and 1 mage goblin. He noticed that there were 15 goblins, but these weren't ordinary goblins. They had specific roles that drove him crazy. He knew his evasion instinct was activated, and his gift controlled his body. He also knew that if he didn't want to die, he should run away. The man told Sangjun that it might be hard for Kyunwoo and asked if he really left him alone. Sangjun didn't answer, knowing that Kyunwoo had changed recently. In the past, he was easily startled by small things, but lately he seemed different, and Sangjun was convinced that he was stronger now, and it was not a bad change. Sangjun knew that Kyunwoo had grown up to be a kind-hearted kid, but he didn't fit the fierce competition in the Divine Swordsman Du family due to his kind-hearted nature. He always hesitated to hurt others, even if it put himself in danger. Sangjun thought of how his son smiled happily when he received his first sword and how he would cry happily whenever he held a sword. Sangjun then sadly looked at his hand, thinking about how many of Kyunwoo's peers mocked him by calling him a rabbit. Whenever he heard that, he wanted to step in but couldn't. He wondered why Kyunwoo had changed when he became a 5th grader. Jaya had told him that the change was because he liked someone in his class, but Sangjun suspected there must be another reason. Sangjun recalled that while he was contemplating Kyunwoo's situation, someone from the Sword Training Academy had contacted him. The man introduced himself as Kyunwoo's swordsmanship teacher. After hearing the teacher's complaints, Sangjun asked if Kyunwoo had been fighting with other kids under the pretext of sparring, asserting that his son wouldn't engage in such behavior without a reason. The teacher hesitated, guessing that Kyunwoo hadn't told his father because of how he might react, and then revealed that Kyunwoo had been bullied. Sangjun, knowing his son would not harm other kids without cause, scolded the teacher in anger. The teacher tried to dismiss the behavior as typical playful roughhousing that he too had often engaged in. He asked Sangjun if it wasn't natural for children of that age to get absorbed in their own strength and play around. Sangjun, furious, questioned if this meant that Kyunwoo had been bullied by other kids so far and if the teacher was joking about such a serious matter. Sangjun was overwhelmed with anger at the thought of someone from the Divine Swordsman Du family receiving such treatment at the Sword Training Academy. He then demanded to know if someone had instructed the teacher to keep silent about the bullying and who they were. The teacher reluctantly disclosed the identity, and Sangjun realized that Kyunwoo had suffered such humiliation because he didn't hold much power within their family. Sangjun figured out that it was Du Bumjun, his third older brother, behind this. He called Bumjun to confront him about the bullying, but Bumjun dismissively said they were just playing. He sarcastically apologized to Sangjun and promised to tell his son Sungwoo to apologize and not to repeat his actions. Still, Bumjun added that Sangjun must have had a hard time due to his cowardly personality, provoking Sangjun to question whether Bumjun considered this an apology. Bumjun retorted, asking Sangjun what more he should do. Reflecting on the situation, Sangjun realized that while he felt powerless, he was just enduring it alone. So, when Kyunwoo expressed his desire to experience real combat, Sangjun felt proud of him and was glad that his son had decided not to endure the bullying any longer. After Kyunwoo cleared the first dungeon and retrieved the key, Sangjun noticed that he performed better than expected. Although Sangjun had worried that his son might panic and rush, he saw that Kyunwoo could handle the situation calmly and adeptly. Sangjun smiled, acknowledging that his child had been a prodigy since a long time ago. However, as he watched worriedly from above, he remembered that Kyunwoo was still only 12 years old and needed to grow calmly. Suddenly, Sangjun's concern deepened when he saw Kyunwoo get injured in the arm, causing Sangjun to clench his teeth at the thought that his misjudgment had put his son in danger. The man next to Sangjun asked if it wasn't the right time to intervene, noting that Kyunwoo seemed to have run out of energy and that the monster might catch him. However, Kyunwoo remained calm, facing the goblins and challenging them to come at him. Sangjun knew that stepping in would disappoint his son but acknowledged that Kyunwoo was quite skilled for his age and decided to simply encourage him. Sangjun then called out to a man named Hongchul, instructing him to prepare the protection shield magic, to which Hongchul responded that it might be needed at any moment. Sangjun then detailed his plan. The moment the goblin attacked Kyunwoo, they would charge in all at once. He would take out the mage goblin first, while Hongchul was to use the protection shield magic as Kyunwoo dodged the archer goblin. However, Sangjun was stunned to see Kyunwoo's rigid movements, indicative of fear, yet he wondered if his perception was clouded by his own apprehension. As he positioned himself, Sangjun was shocked to witness Kyunwoo slashing the goblins in front of him with his Beast King-style fourth form Lion Needle recursion attack. Before this, Kyunwoo was running away, aware of the danger because the goblins coordinated so well that there was no opening for an attack. However, he knew he couldn't keep fleeing, or he would remain the same fearful Kyunwoo. Positioning himself with his sword, he thought the Beast King-style first form should work, but was annoyed by Kyunwoo's instinctive gift of evasion. His body avoided the goblin attack involuntarily, and the persistent voice in his head kept interfering, warning him of death if he stayed. It told him that if he died there, all his efforts would have been wasted, and that fleeing was his only respite. He noticed this voice restricted his actions and made his body move against his will. When the voice urged him to flee, he tried to command his gift to stop running and to listen to him. He wondered if this was how the real Kyunwoo felt before his awakening, noticing his body torn between will and instinct, feeling as if it would rip into two pieces. As one of the sword-wielding goblins lunged at him, the voice screamed at him to dodge, but instead, he swung his sword forward, shouting back at the voice that he must not avoid it. After killing the goblin, he realized he could resist the evasion instinct and that there might be enough distance between them now, unaware of the archer goblin behind him. When the goblin released an arrow, it struck him in the shoulder, leaving him bewildered by the sudden attack. Goblins then appeared in front of him, walking closer and causing him to tremble with fear. He walked backward, not realizing the danger. Back against the crystal behind him, he knew a mistake now could be fatal. Peeking back and seeing a dead end, he shouted in fear. Tearfully, he looked at the goblin in front of him, realizing he might truly die and needed to escape, yet wondering where to run when all paths were blocked. Was this the price of defying his gift? He thought he would die at this rate, and the voice repeatedly told him he didn't want to die. Clutching his sword tightly, he lamented that if he had known it would turn out this way, he would have preferred to remain unaware of his past life. He pondered the difference between his struggles then and now. Knowing he had been blessed with a good life as a divine swordsman of the Du family and a comrade of Kang Hangul, he wondered why he had to be reborn as Du Kyunwoo. He then saw himself reflected in the crystal, crying like a child. This made him wonder if the person in the reflection, shoulders hunched, trembling with fear and shedding tears, was truly him. He felt anger upon seeing his reflection and realized that he absolutely must not recall his past life for no reason. If he hadn't, he'd probably be living aimlessly, with a face showing such despair. He told himself that he didn't want to live like that and had been pushing himself to the limit to overcome his weaknesses and become strong. He then clenched his teeth, wondering how he could forget his conviction and shrivel up like a coward. He resolved not to die in such a way, nor did he want to run away, so he told the voice in his head that they should overcome that fear and move on. The voice in his head urged him to run away, but he planted his foot firmly on the ground, ignoring the voice that told him not to proceed. He then released a blue thunderbolt, telling the voice that he must fight for his life. A notification then appeared, showing him that he had acquired the skill Instinct Control Level 1, which allowed him to control his instincts at will. He began to slash at the head of the goblin in front of him, causing the other goblins to look at him in confusion. He then charged towards them, slashing as he went, and noticed that unlike before, his body could move freely, feeling as if electricity was surging within him. When the archer goblin was about to shoot him again, he rushed toward it, slashing while dodging the arrow. He felt unstoppable. Sangjun, who was watching, wondered what he had just seen. He was sure Kyunwoo had been full of fear just a minute ago, but now Kyunwoo had regained his composure. Hongchul asked Sangjun what had just happened, and Sangjun replied that it was his son's doing. However, Hongchul clarified that he wasn't asking about that. He was curious how Kyunwoo fought so well when the protective shield they had prepared to use against the mage goblin wasn't even required. Hongchul then asked Sangjun if all members of the Du family were like Kyunwoo, but Sangjun could only reply that he wasn't sure either. Sangjun noticed that Kyunwoo could predict where the attacks would come from and even managed to avoid them, making Sangjun guess that he had managed to overcome the crisis, and wondered if Kyunwoo had now awakened. In disbelief, Sangjun asked aloud if it was Kyunwoo's gift. Sangjun then thought that to reach an awakening, Kyunwoo must have pushed beyond his limits while being determined to change, and that his determination was truly extraordinary. However, his thoughts were interrupted when Hongchul called out to him. Sangjun turned to see Hongchul and was shocked to see Kyunwoo use his Beast King style first form Lion Crush Cut to kill a goblin. Sangjun asked if the thunder emanating from Kyunwoo was the blue thunder and was stunned when he saw it. In amazement, Hongchul told Sangjun that the divine swordsmanship of the Du family was really impressive and asked if it indeed was the famous blue thunder. However, Sangjun didn't answer, still in disbelief at what he had witnessed, and wondered if it was even possible for a kid to master the blue thunder technique and how one could become that strong in such a short amount of time. Staring at Kyunwoo, Sangjun thought it was impossible. He then asked if Kyunwoo really had awakened when Hongchul noticed a system notification announcing that they had cleared the gate. Hongchul told Sangjun it was a clearance notification, and Sangjun just sighed, still unable to believe what was happening. Exhausted, Kyunwoo lay on the ground and said he was tired to death. Suddenly, the system popped up in front of him, showing that he had pushed his body to the limit, so his physical strength, muscle strength, and agility stats had all risen by 1. However, Kyunwoo thought his stats should have increased during the fight with the goblins, not now. He knew that Brave Hearts was a game where physical strength stats don't increase with leveling up and that the only way to do it would be through training or sparring in the academy, which was a tricky part of the game. Yet, he thought it had been easy, considering that Brave Hearts aims for replayability, where existing data could be transferred to the next playthrough. He realized it was impossible now that it was not a game. Kyunwoo thought about what he should do next, gain tons of experience and become stronger. Sangjun then sweetly called to him and approached, asking if he was alive, unaware that one of the dead goblins was releasing something shiny from its body. He responded to Sangjun, admitting that he thought he overdid it because he couldn't move at all. Sangjun told him that it was expected after moving like that, expressing his shock at Kyunwoo triggering the blue thunder and speculating that Kyunwoo might be the youngest ever to do so. Surprised to hear this, Kyunwoo asked Sangjun if he had really performed the blue thunder. The blue thunder is a phenomenon that occurs when using the signature sword technique of divine swordsmanship, the Beast King style, where the friction between the man and the atmosphere creates a blue current. Proper posture and speed, the extent of power applied to the sword, and correct activation of the mana circuit are all necessary. It's a phenomenon that only appears when various elements are perfectly harmonized. Kyunwoo then remembered feeling something burst out from him and realized it was the blue thunder. He told Sangjun that he wasn't sure if he could do it again and couldn't really remember. Sangjun reassured him not to worry because having experienced it once, his body would remember, and with continuous training, he would be able to do it again. Sangjun then praised him for doing a great job, but Kyunwoo just stared at Sangjun and asked where Hongchul was. Sangjun replied that Hongchul was working. Shortly after, Hongchul arrived, happily holding something. He told Kyunwoo that he had really been through a lot and, thanks to him, they were able to obtain magic stones. While Hongchul was busy praising him for his blue thunder, he noticed shiny things on the goblin, so he grabbed one and shouted to Sangjun that there was something there. Sangjun told him that he was lucky because he had found a lost stone and explained that a lost stone contains a providence and can be used as material like a magic stone. Kyunwoo remembered that in the game, magic stones were used as currency or for artifacts, but law stones could be converted into stats, making him wonder what kind of law stone it was and if he should examine it. The system then showed him that it was the lowest grade agility law stone, which enhances the user's ability, increases agility by 1, and is effective for users with an agility below 60. He thought it was not bad and he'd like to have it. Hongchul asked Sangjin what if the law stone resonated with Kyunwoo and if they should give it to him. Sangjin told Hongchul that he was still good at navigating those social waters and thanked him. Sangjin then suggested that they should check if the law stones resonate, so Kyunwoo should try infusing it with mana. He then put mana on it, knowing that it was bound to resonate with him, and Sangjin excitedly told him that it was responding, which meant it was his. Hongchul then told Sangjin that he was suddenly craving some beef, making Sangjin shake his head and sigh in silence. Monday morning arrived, and he was in the room, feeling his whole body ache. Ever since the day after the actual combat, he had suffered from terrible body aches, and Jaya angrily asked Sangjin why he ended up like this. He was lying on his desk, realizing only now that the recoil from using the evasion instinct was severe, so he decided to really try to avoid doing it again. Hanwoo then arrived in their classroom and worriedly asked him why he was like this and if he was hurt. He greeted her good morning and told her he was a bit sick over the weekend and had a severe body ache. She worriedly asked him how it happened, if he had taken any medicine, and if he was okay now. He replied that he had an actual combat session over the weekend, and she asked him if he meant fighting with monsters, if it was okay for them to do so at their age, and if it wasn't dangerous. He replied that he was from the Du family, so all his cousins his age had done it, and he was the only one who hadn't yet. She told him that she had some bandages and ointment in her bag, but he told her it was okay because the wounds had healed and asked her why she carried those around. She then replied that she used to get hurt often, though not so much these days. He looked at her and thought that it must be from all the bullying she had experienced. She then got closer to him and told him she would do it. He told her that his wounds had healed and asked her why she bothered, but she just shouted at him to just listen to her and give her his arm. After putting bandages on his face, she told him it was all done, and he shockingly asked her if it was a bandage, but she just told him to stay still because it would make it heal faster. He showed her his medicine while telling her that he was really okay and it was all healed, so if she really wanted to help, she could remind him to take his medicine at lunch. She stared at him in silence for a moment and put a bandage on his arm while telling him that he should let her know if there was more she could do to help him, and since he really looked like he was in pain, she would listen to anything just for today. He tells her that if that was what she said, then he asks her if he can touch her ears, leaving her shocked and causing her to stutteringly ask what he just said. He apologizes to her and tells her it was just a joke, realizing that it might have been too much and that he seemed kind of bold. She thinks for a moment, then grabs his hand and shoutingly agrees to his request. She puts his hand on her head while warning him to just touch her ears quickly, not to linger for too long, and to tell her if it doesn't cheer him up. He stutteringly replies okay and touches her ears, amazed at how soft and fluffy they are. He then enjoys touching them without realizing that he has been doing it for too long. She then jumps away and shouts at him to stop, saying it should be enough to cheer him up. She was red as a tomato, wondering why it felt so good to have her ears touched and if it was because Kyunwoo was used to raising rabbits. She then realized that she almost got completely lost in the sensation while he was caressing her ear, and felt embarrassed about it, but seeing how much he enjoyed it, she guessed that she should let him do it every once in a while. She then jumped a little surprised when he looked at her, making her wonder if he had read her thoughts. He thanked her and told her that he felt energized now. He then asks her what she thinks about them becoming hunters together. She was shocked by his sudden suggestion and asked him if it doesn't cost a lot of money. He replied that he thought she had all the qualities needed to be a hunter and could tell by looking at her that she came from a noble family. She tells him that he is saying weird things again, but he tells her that he has his reasons. He then begins to explain to her that first, she is a demi-human, which means she is physically superior to others. Second, the mana she unconsciously emits feels very dense, suggesting there is a high chance she is good at handling magic. She tells him that she has never released mana, and he can't believe that a Witch of Calamity can't handle magic, so he tells her that every living thing unconsciously emits mana and he can sense it because he knows how to handle it. She asks him if he really means it, and he nods confidently. She then looks at her hand, wondering if she could really become a hunter in the future. She knows that when she turns 19, she will have to leave the orphanage. It would be great if she got adopted, but she understands that as a demi-human, it is unlikely, and becoming a hunter could lead to a successful life with high earnings. However, she also doubts whether she can fight monsters given her fragility. He sighs and tells her there's no need to worry. He promises her that she can do it and that he'll be right by her side, so she shouldn't worry because he'll take care of her. Her eyes light up when she hears this, and seeing him confidently tell her that if she became a hunter, she would be hunting with him and that he believed in her, so she should believe in herself too. She shyly wonders what Kyunwoo sees in her to be so confident, and while it feels weird, it truly makes her feel like she can do anything. She then stutteringly asks him if he will take responsibility. He grabs her hand, telling her that it is settled and they should attend the same middle school, and then enroll in the high school academy together. She shyly asks him if he really means that they should do it together, which he confirms and tells her that they should start by joining a sword academy to build up their strength. She panically asks him if he means she should enroll in a sword academy and reminds him that she doesn't have the money to enroll in such a place. But he simply asks her why she should pay when it is run by their family and tells her that she can attend for free. Confused, she asks him why he is being so nice to her when she doesn't have much to offer him. He replies that he is hoping to benefit from her success later on, making her ask him what he means by that. He tells her that someday, when she becomes a famous hunter, maybe he'll gain some benefits from it, and if he has to give a reason, that's it, nothing more. She stares at him in surprise for a moment and eventually smiles. She then laughingly asks him what he really means and tells him that he is really weird. But the truth is she is really grateful to him. She then asks him if it means that she'll be learning how to use a sword too, but he replies no and tells her that she needs to focus on physical training. Confused, she asks him why. He responds that she should learn magic because she seems to have a talent for it and tells her that it would be better if she had a teacher. After that, their training continued steadily. Once their school ended, they would focus on learning basic swordsmanship or strengthening their endurance at Kyunwoo's family dojo. On days when they didn't go to the dojo, they would train together at Kyunwoo's home, though he often felt like Hanul was coming over for dinner rather than training. He thought that the purpose seemed reversed, but it was good to have some motivation. However, since he was also a beginner with magic, he realized he needed a new teacher and wondered where he could find such a person. He then remembered the Witch of Colors, Hong Yina, who in the game was mainly an instructor teaching elemental magic to academy students. He speculated that at that point, she was likely wandering across the country, known as the Witch of Five Colors. He leaned back in his chair, thinking he'd asked Sangjun to put out some feelers, but guessed he could do nothing but wait, hopeful they would meet soon enough. Suddenly, someone asked him what he was so deep in thought about, and he realized he hadn't even noticed Sangjun was there, which made him shout in surprise and tell Sangjun that he really scared him. Sangjun laughingly asked what he was thinking about so deeply that he hadn't noticed him coming in, and he replied that he was just wondering when he would get to meet the person he had asked him about a while back. Sangjun told him not to be impatient and that they had gotten in touch today, which excited him. Sangjun then informed him that they agreed to visit in a month, however, if they were not satisfied with his skills, they wouldn't teach him. He told Sangjun he was prepared for that possibility, but if he was not talented, there was nothing he could do. Yet, he was confident that wouldn't happen because, even though he was unsure about himself, there was no doubt Hong Yina would show interest in Hanul's talent. Sangjun then mentioned that there was also some bad news, which piqued his curiosity as he noticed his father's concerned expression. Sangjun then revealed that although it had only been a short while since they began, it was the same thing every year, and next week was Parents' Day, so they needed to visit the main family. Sangjun then asked if he was okay with it, but he countered by asking if Seungwoo was coming too. Sangjun confirmed yes and told him that if he didn't want to go, he would go alone. He knows that Do Seungwoo is the one who incited the triplets to bully Kyunwoo. He then asked Sangjun what was next, and just as Sangjun was about to explain, Sangjun noticed his attitude and asked him what he was thinking about. He just creepily smiled, thinking that his cousin's presence was enough reason for him to go to their main family house. May is family month. During the weekend on Parents' Day, after a late lunch, they all headed to the main household of the Shinjeomdu. Sangjun told him to keep an eye on his little sister Yiyun to ensure she doesn't cause any trouble, and reminded Yiyun not to try climbing the lion statue like she did last year. She excitedly replied, yes, and he affirmed that he would watch her. Sangjun then cautioned him not to stir things up and pleaded with him not to do so, but he merely asked Sangjun when he had ever done so. Sangjun admitted he hadn't, but his recent actions had made him a bit nervous. He reassured Sangjun not to worry, but thought to himself that it couldn't be helped. They were always kept on edge at every family gathering. This is why Jaya and their father become sensitive and wary each time there is a gathering like this. Considering that nothing good had ever happened at these family gatherings, he wasn't surprised. He knew this time would be no different, but he felt compelled to go to the main family house because he needed to acquire courage, no matter what. The day before heading to the main family house, Kyunwoo was training with Hanul and Yiyun. He reflected on his progress, acknowledging that although he had learned to control his instincts, it was not enough. He refused to be swayed by that damned evasion instinct again. He realized he needed a skill that could properly control it, and there was one that fit the bill: courage, a skill that resists the power emitted by others. He knew there would be times when powerful beings emitted pressure by releasing their aura and killing intent to intimidate their opponents. When exposed to such pressure, players' stats would decrease, often leading to defeat in battle. Courage not only allows them to resist it but also increases their concentration and evasion rate during life-threatening moments. He knew he had to learn the skill, courage, without question because it was the perfect combo when paired with his evasion instinct and instinct control, which was ideal for combat against Jinwoo. He'd like to learn it before heading to the academy, but he wondered where he could acquire it. He also knows there is a problem because the conditions to acquire courage are quite troublesome. The in-game requirements are as follows. First, the character trying to acquire courage must form a party with only one companion, who is stronger than themselves. Second, after meeting the first condition, the character must face an opponent who emits pressure without any external assistance. Although the stronger companion, Kang Hanbiul for example, shouldn't intervene in the battle until courage is acquired, this is not an absolute requirement. Remember, in the game, Hanbiul is the protagonist, so excluding him from the party isn't an option. He knows that courage can be obtained with a certain probability by dodging the opponent's attack, and the chances of acquiring it increase if the opponent is strong, making it quite difficult to obtain. He thinks it would be easier to obtain it while he is still relatively weak, similar to when he mastered instinct control. However, the problem is, he doesn't know where to find a strong opponent who emits pressure, and he knows that facing such a foe alone could be disastrous. He then starts to think of someone who could emit pressure without killing him, a strong person who wouldn't kill him. He then thinks of someone perfect for the description and smiles, knowing that there is someone like that at the Shinjiamdo. A moment later, they arrive at Shinjiamdo, and they both get out of the car. People line up on their side respectfully and greet them politely. Sangjin asks the butler how he has been and how his brothers are, to which the butler replies that currently, except for Du Wujin's family, everyone else has gathered. He asks the butler if his eldest brother hasn't arrived yet, but the butler simply tells him that he'll show them to their room. Jaya asks the butler about the family elders, and the butler replies that they are in the library, having a chat. Sangjin tells them that it was as expected and asks them what they want to do now. He replies that staying in the room would be boring, so they should go to the training ground instead, which Iyun agrees to and tells Sangjin that she'll go too. Sangjin then tells them that he'll see them later and warns them not to play too rough with the others there. Sangjin then tells him that he is counting on him, and he replies that he won't stir trouble as long as they don't provoke him. He then asks Iyun if they should head out, and Iyun excitedly replies, yes. They head to the training ground, and Iyun excitedly points out that the doll is moving. He tells her that it was probably something made in Yonseong Mana. She asks him what Yonseong Mana is, and he explains that it is one of the 10 great houses, like their Shinjiam Dojo. Iyun comments that 10 is way too many, and he looks around, noticing that the training dummies they used at the high school academy are present even now. He knows that something exclusive was installed at the Shinjiam Dojo, which is not accessible to the general public, and guesses that it might be because of their shared background in prestigious families. Iyun then excitedly points to the training tiles and tells him that they also look fun, to which he agrees. She rushes to them while shouting that she wants to try them too. Just as he is about to tell her to be careful, someone behind him asks if he isn't too late and what kept him. He turns around and sees Du Seungwoo teasingly asking how he has been and if he didn't get lost on his way there. He just stares at Seungwoo in silence. Then Seungwoo bends down to Iyun and asks how she has been, but she can't answer out of fear. He tells Seungwoo that he hasn't been okay because of him. He then bends down to face Seungwoo, asking him how he has been, and if he hasn't been okay because he'd be happy if that were the case, which makes Seungwoo angrily ask him what he just said. He then pulls Iyun away from Seungwoo, telling Seungwoo that unfortunately, he hadn't been doing well thanks to a certain someone. He's not sure what he did or how he managed it, but he thinks he handled them well. Seungwoo was infuriated and wondered how dare he say that. Seungwoo then swore that he really disliked Kyunwoo because he still vividly remembered incidents from their childhood. As a child, Seungwoo was being scolded by his father, Du Bumjun, who asked him why he couldn't do a simple thing properly and why he didn't have even half his potential, despite being his son. In tears, Seungwoo tried to call out to his father in a stuttering voice, but Bumjun just shouted at him that he had seen how his grandfather was impressed by Kyunwoo. Bumjun then told Seungwoo that if he wanted to remain his son, he should try everything to surpass Du Kyunwoo. Seungwoo was in pain when he thought that it was always Kyunwoo, and no one cared about him. Then one day, Seungwoo was bleeding, and Kyunwoo panicked upon seeing it while he was busy wondering what Kyunwoo had just done that caused his nosebleed. Hyunwoo, worried, told him that his nose was bleeding and asked what they should do, but he didn't answer because he was busy wondering if he had lost to Hyunwoo again. Hyunwoo then rushed outside, shouting to him that he would help. But he just glared at Hyunwoo, hating him and angry that he was losing to Hyunwoo every time. He then hit Hyunwoo from behind, thinking that he should be the winner. Hyunwoo was slammed to the floor and Seungwoo shouted that he had won, calling out to his father Bumjun to tell him that he had done it. Hyunwoo, confused, called out to Seungwoo, but Seungwoo just said that he had beaten the genius of the divine swordsmanship of the Do family. Seungwoo then continuously beat Hyunwoo while laughing and asking him if it wasn't so easy to win against him now and why he didn't respond. Hyunwoo, in tears and shaking, told Seungwoo to stop. But Seungwoo continued attacking Hyunwoo. Since the day he knocked Hyunwoo down, the situation had turned around for him. The kids begin to whisper that everyone thought Hyunwoo was a genius when he was young, but it turned out that he just became an ordinary boy. Hearing this, Seungwoo smiles, thinking that Hyunwoo was foolish and he should have taken action earlier. Later, Seungwoo mocks Hyunwoo, asking how he can fail to kill even a single rabbit, and questioning if he is out of his mind. Hyunwoo shouts at Seungwoo not to speak like that, but Seungwoo taunts him further, asking what Hyunwoo would do if he kept talking, whether he wanted to fight. Seungwoo then challenges Hyunwoo to a fight, declaring he'll knock him down like last time, instilling fear in Hyunwoo. Seungwoo tells Hyunwoo that if he isn't going to fight, then he should just hop like a rabbit. At that moment, Seungwoo realizes that Hyunwoo is extremely afraid of hurting others and doesn't fit in a martial arts family. Seungwoo then grabs Iyun, wondering if Hyunwoo will run away again, thinking he can't even fight back. Seungwoo then confronts Hyunwoo, asking if he can face him properly now, suggesting they set aside time for a duel and warning him that he won't go easy on him, thinking Hyunwoo will refuse and tremble. However, Hyunwoo surprises him by asking if they should do it and if they should get on with it now, leaving Seungwoo stunned in shock and disbelief. On the other hand, in the parents' room, Jaya covers her nose because of the cigarette smell. Sangjun worriedly asks her if she is okay. She asks why he is concerned, and he replies that he was just asking because she dislikes family gatherings. She explains that being looked down upon as a commoner isn't something that just happened overnight, and hearing about how he married into a prestigious family without even being qualified has been exhausting. However, she says she's fine as long as it doesn't affect their family. He thanks her and shields her with his power, telling her that it should block the smell of cigarettes. She thanks him for his thoughtfulness, telling him he is the best. However, they are startled when someone speaks from behind them, and they turn to see Do Bumjun, the third son of the divine swordsman of the Do family and Do Seungwoo's father. Bumjun tells them it's been a while now and that this is their first meeting since what happened to Hyunwoo. He mentions that they only discussed it over the phone, but he thinks it would be better to talk face to face. He tells Seungwoo not to bother Hyunwoo anymore, which makes Jaya confusedly ask him to clarify. Bumjun then teasingly asks what if Hyunwoo ends up traumatized because of Seungwoo and notes that it would be a big problem. He adds that if they need to go to the hospital because of the incident, he should let him know because he'll introduce them to a good psychiatrist and apologize for Seungwoo's behavior. Jaya worriedly asks if Hyunwoo is getting bullied and what Bumjun means by his comments. Surprisingly, he slaps Bumjun's hand away. Bumjun, taken aback, asks if he really just did that, but he simply questions what Bumjun meant by his earlier remarks, apologizes, and tells Bumjun to instruct Seungwoo to speak directly to Hyunwoo and not to interfere in their affairs since it is a matter for the kids to resolve themselves. Bumjun angrily asks if he's sure he won't regret rejecting his help and if he's confident he can handle it all by himself. Suddenly, a man calls out to Bumjun in panic, shouting that Seungwoo and Hyunwoo are fighting. Bumjun smiles upon hearing this and teasingly remarks that it turned out as he expected. Bumjun also mentions that he guessed it was better to let them resolve it themselves, as he suggested, and because Hyunwoo is a member of the divine swordsman of the Do family, Hyunwoo needs to maintain his reputation. They might be able to see their fight if they go now. Bumjun then teasingly asks what he thinks about it and asks everyone if they want to watch the fight with him. The drunken parents excitedly agree. Bumjun then tells everyone that they should hurry to see the fight and teasingly shouts that they can't let anything bad happen to their dear Hyunwoo. Sangjun simply asks Bumjun if he meant something bad happening to Hyunwoo and if he thought Hyunwoo was that weak. Bumjun starts walking away while telling him to just steel himself and wait at the training ground because they should not settle their emotions during the kids' fight. Sangjun slaps his face in frustration, but he thinks it is a good opportunity and that it would be best if Hyunwoo could beat Seungwoo. Then, Jaya calls him and asks if it means Seungwoo has been bullying Hyunwoo. Smiling, she tells him that she never heard about it before, but assumes he must know the details and questions why he didn't tell her earlier. Stuttering, he tells her that he was going to tell her, but just then, a loud slap can be heard in the room. A moment later, they arrive at the training ground in a rush, with Sangjun sporting a huge slap mark and wounds on his face. He asks a man what happened to the kids, and the man replies that they are still fighting. Jaya then spots them and points them out. Suddenly, Seungwoo jumps at him with his lion iron whip, and Jaya worriedly shouts for him to be careful. He immediately positions his training sword and blocks it with his Beast King style defense. Second form, Lion Iron Shield. Seungwoo continues to attack, arrogantly telling him that he knows he will use that technique and that the only way to win against the second form is by using a third or fourth form. Seungwoo also tells him that he has read him like a book, so he won't be able to surpass him, but he simply asks Seungwoo what he is talking about. He then kicks Seungwoo in the stomach, and Seungwoo is surprised that he just attacked him with a normal kick. Seungwoo then falls to the floor, and he teasingly tells him that he was slow. Meanwhile, in the main building of the Shinjiam Dojo, an old man finished showering and stood up, feeling refreshed. Men approached Su Wang Duyick, the head of the Shinjiam Dojo, to report that his banquet would start soon and that they were ready to assist him with his preparations. Su Wang mentioned that it had been some time since everyone had gathered and asked if he was correct in thinking that nothing troublesome had occurred recently. One of the men replied that there had been no significant issues to concern him, though his two sons had argued a bit. When Su Wang inquired about which sons they were referring to, the man named Bumjun and Sangjun. Su Wang then clarified, asking if they meant Sangjun, the one who knows his place. The man explained that the issue seemed to center around his grandchildren. Su Wang asked if it involved the bullying incident and remarked that even Sangjun couldn't stay silent when it came to his own children. He then inquired further about what had happened, and the man replied that Seungwoo and Kyunwoo had started sparring around that time, which allowed the young masters to resolve the issue themselves. Su Wang noted that Sangjun must be embarrassed again, but the man informed him that Kyunwoo had been the one to suggest sparring first. Su Wang expressed surprise, remembering Kyunwoo as a timid and fragile child. The man confirmed it was indeed Kyunwoo, adding that he had boldly proposed the idea to Seungwoo. Su Wang asked if he could still catch them if he went now, but the man replied that quite some time had passed since it started, and it might already be over by the time he arrived. Nevertheless, Su Wang quickly removed his towel, remarking that he could guess the outcome, but still wondered what Kyunwoo was thinking and what had inspired him to challenge Seungwoo to a sparring match. He then dressed swiftly and excitedly told his men that he would go check it out immediately. He ordered them to prepare his things. Meanwhile, at the training ground, Kyunwoo's parents and the other adults were shocked when he easily defeated Seungwoo. Kyunwoo thought it was nothing special and then noticed that his instinct control level had increased to level 2. He hadn't planned to end it so quickly and wondered if he should request another round when Seungwoo woke up, considering all the times Seungwoo had annoyed him. Despite being the same age and often compared within the Shinjiam Dojo, he tried to maintain a good relationship as cousins, but it seemed Seungwoo must have truly resented him. He also knows that Seungwoo's bullying persists, causing him to sink into self-loathing. 5 years later, he enrolls in the academy where Hanbyul is studying. Although he is still dominated by Seungwoo, Hanbyul rescues him. Subsequently, Hanbyul defeats Seungwoo, who emerges as a formidable boss, and then recruits him as an ally. Essentially, Seungwoo's actions inadvertently provide the opportunity for Hanbyul and Kyunwoo to become friends. Despite knowing everything, Kyunwoo realizes he cannot continue to tolerate Seungwoo's bullying. He acknowledges that the dynamics have shifted from the old game storyline and vows to change, refusing to remain a victim any longer. When Seungwoo still doesn't get up, Kyunwoo sternly tells him to wake up and shakes him with his training sword, admonishing him not to think the confrontation is over. He angrily accuses Seungwoo of feigning unconsciousness and warns him that he has barely started to repay him for all the suffering he has caused. Grabbing Seungwoo by the collar, he shouts, asking if Seungwoo can hear him, but then notices a wet yellow stain spreading from Seungwoo's shorts, which disgusts him. His parents call out to him worriedly. Suddenly, Bumjun laughingly shouts that the sparring might already be over and there's nothing to see. Bumjun praises Kyunwoo, advising him not to dwell too much on the defeat, but is shocked when he sees Seungwoo collapsed and having wet himself in fear. Enraged, Bumjun pushes Kyunwoo away, shouting, demanding to know what he did to leave Seungwoo in such a state, and how dare he treat his son that way. Sangjun, furious, confronts Bumjun, asking what he thinks he's doing to Kyunwoo and if he's lost his mind. Sangjun then loudly reminds Bumjun that he was the one who insisted they not interfere, regardless of the sparring's outcome, and questions if Bumjun remembers that. Bumjun retorts, shouting for Sangjun to step aside and questioning his authority to speak to him in such a manner. In shock from seeing his father and Bumjun arguing, Sangjun asserts that just because Bumjun is his brother doesn't give him the right to do whatever he pleases, shouting that he was there and it was a fair match, but Bumjun dismisses Sangjun's words as biased. While he was overhearing his father and uncle arguing, he sighed, recognizing the chaos, and asked his mother if he should intervene before things escalated further. He pointed out that Iyun was present and suggested they should stop the fight, but he was taken aback when his aunt shouted, accusing his mother of calling her son a thug. His mother retorted, explaining that the sparring had ended and Bumjun had struck the boy unnecessarily, which indeed made him a thug. During this heated exchange, his little sister jumped in to help their mother by biting his aunt, leaving her shocked and thinking that his mother was intimidating. He stood stunned, observing the unfolding drama around him, and pondered frustratingly over how he could possibly stop them. Suddenly, a voice boomed out, demanding to know what everyone was doing. At that moment, the system alerted him that he was exposed to pressure, reducing all his stats by 10%. Everyone paused to look at the source of the voice, and he instantly recognized it. He remembered that in the game, while Academy City was the main setting and other elements weren't detailed, the strongest individuals, including the most revered swordsmen at the Xinjiang Dojo, were sometimes mentioned. One such individual was Su Wang Duyik, the master who ruled over all swordsmen. Su Wang declared the scene a complete mess and berated them, asking if this was how members of a prestigious family behaved. He expressed his embarrassment at the spectacle and sarcastically noted how commendable it was for brothers to fight. Turning to his sons, Su Wang demanded to know what was happening. Bumjun tried to blame Qunwu, but Su Wang cut him off, stating he hadn't asked for his input. He walked closer, preferring to hear from the person directly involved, making him nervously wonder why his grandfather would single him out. Su Wang then addressed him directly, asking for an accurate account of the events. He didn't answer immediately, overwhelmed by fear. Facing his grandfather felt like confronting a mountain. Shaking, possibly from the pressure exerted by the head of Xinjiang Dojo, he stuttered out that he had initiated the sparring and won. Su Wang noticed his discomfort and released his aura, which seemed to lift the heavy atmosphere. Su Wang then asked him directly if it was true that he had challenged Xunwu to a sparring match and won. He replied affirmatively and confidently told Su Wang that he had defeated Xunwu. Su Wang inquired about the details of the victory, asking if he had used any unfair tactics. He explained that Xunwu had lost his balance after receiving a kick, allowing him to strike Xunwu on the back of the head, which knocked him out. He assured Su Wang that if he sought accounts from the other spectators, he would receive more detailed information, although he admitted internally that his explanation might seem incomplete, but he prioritized honesty. Su Wang then questioned why he had touched Xunwu after he had passed out. He responded that he was concerned something might be wrong with Xunwu, who wasn't responding, and he tried to wake him. He admitted, albeit silently to himself, that part of his action was driven by frustration from being bullied, a detail he chose not to disclose. He explained that this was the reason he slapped Xunwu. Su Wang smiled and acknowledged his explanation, then laughed loudly, commenting on how interesting the situation was. Xunwu's mother asked Su Wang if he was really going to accept Qunwu's story, and Bumjun suggested they hear their side of the story. Su Wang asserted that the matter appeared to be resolved among those involved in the sparring and suggested they should leave it at that, leaving Xunwu's parents shocked. Su Wang then declared that they needed to recognize what was apparent and questioned whether they should consult their son Xunwu, which confused them. Xunwu clenched his teeth, and when Su Wang asked him if he had been conscious for a while, which Xunwu confirmed, everyone was surprised to learn he hadn't been unconscious. Su Wang commanded Xunwu to tell the truth, questioning if he believed Qunwu had used unfair tactics to win. Xunwu denied any foul play, admitting Qunwu had beaten him fairly, which made it clear that Xunwu couldn't lie in front of his grandfather. Su Wang then addressed Xunwu's parents, pointing out that their son had acknowledged the truth, and asked if they were still going to be stubborn. Both parents apologized. Su Wang addressed everyone seriously, insisting that the matter should not be brought up again as it was settled. He then walked away, thanking everyone for coming and mentioning that it was almost time for the banquet, suggesting they continue their conversations there. As Su Wang approached the door, everyone respectfully told him they would see him at the banquet. Before exiting, Su Wang paused, looked back, and told Qunwu that after the banquet, he would evaluate his skills in a trial match, noting that he was looking forward to it. Afterward, Xunwu and his parents left in embarrassment. Qunwu, touching his back in pain, pondered over his grandfather's words but felt relieved that at least the matter was settled. However, he was suddenly startled by someone seriously calling his name. When he turned, he saw his mother with a smile, asking if they could talk for a bit. Moments later, in their room, Jaya asked him if he understood what he had done wrong, to which he replied affirmatively. Jaya then pressed him to specify his mistake. He admitted that the spar with Xunwu had unnecessarily involved his father and her while Sangjun and Yiyun watched in fear. Jaya questioned him sternly if that was truly all he thought he had done wrong, her cold tone making him fearful that she was furious. He remembered similar scoldings from her in his previous life, where she would say that if he hadn't been born, her life wouldn't have been ruined. These harsh words were typically spoken when she was drinking. In her worst moments, she would throw objects at him. Powerless in these situations, he could only wait for her to regain her senses, at which point she would embrace him and weep. He was uncertain whether her apologies were due to guilt or simply a rush of emotions, but he always comforted her. He occasionally resented her for this, but having no one else to rely on, he could only offer her comfort and hope she wouldn't leave him. His hope was dashed whenever she promised to make a lot of money in return for him before leaving again. At 10 years old, despite her sweet words, he recognized the harsh reality but chose to believe her to preserve peace. As a result, he lived recklessly, accepting it as the natural outcome of his life. Though he didn't dwell on it often, he sometimes thought about the person who had abandoned him, even in his current life. Jaya then asks him if he truly does not understand what he did wrong. He apologizes, guessing that perhaps this place isn't so different after all. Jaya reaches out, pressing him on what he did wrong, but he remains silent, contemplating how he could possibly ask for her forgiveness. He closes his eyes, wondering if his current mother would be appeased if he allowed her to hit him as his previous life's mother did, or if he should apologize for being born. However, he is taken aback when Jaya suddenly hugs him tightly and reassures him that there's no need for such thoughts, expressing her upset because he hadn't told her about the bullying he endured from Seungwoo. She then apologizes to him, gently patting his head, regretting that she was unaware of his struggles and acknowledging how hard it must have been for him. Jaya embraces him again, tearfully apologizing, which makes him wonder why he was so fearful when his past and present lives are so different. He realizes he had always suffered in silence, not considering the deep wounds it left on his parents' hearts. He hugs his mother back, apologizing for not confiding in her sooner and promises to be more open in the future. Yi-yoon, also in tears, tells Jaya that he shouldn't cry. Jaya responds that she isn't crying and invites her daughter to join in the hug, assuring her that she will protect her. Yi-yoon then hugs Jaya and him together, exclaiming that she will protect her mother. Sangjin approaches, seeking a hug too, but Jaya stares at him with anger, leading him to question why she can forgive her son so easily but not him. Jaya tells Sangjin that until he understands, there can be no forgiveness for him. While his father tries to soothe his mother, his phone rings. He checks it to find a text from Hanul announcing she made it to the top of the mountain. He sighs with a smile and laughs out loud, drawing curious glances from his parents and little sister, thrilled by the prospect of living his life anew. Suddenly, someone knocks on their door, announcing that the banquet will start soon and offers to help them get ready and guide them to the hall. Meanwhile, in another villa, a man informs the family that it's almost time for the banquet, so they should prepare. A woman asks her daughter if she is ready for the evaluation match, to which Xian confidently replies that she is. A moment later, at the Sacred Sword Taoist banquet, he sat at their table, sensing the essence of a sacred family with a 200-year-old legacy. As he reflected on the family's size, calculating the 7 direct lineage members and the wider branches, he realized their total numbered around 48 people. Suddenly, he overheard someone comment disdainfully that they always acted all high and mighty but should now look at themselves. Confused, he turned and saw people chiding Bumjun's family, noting the awkwardness they must have felt preparing to come there and suggesting they could only blame themselves. He understood that the earlier incident had opened the door for others to criticize them, and he despised the thought that if he had lost the duel, his family would be the ones facing such disgrace. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the murmur as someone slammed a cane into the floor, demanding silence and announcing that it was commendable to see more attendees that year. Su Wang then addressed the gathering, suggesting that since everyone was probably hungry, they should begin with the meal and officially start the banquet. As the waiters distributed the food, he pondered the reason their family had surpassed other noble families. After a great upheaval, the world had experienced a collapse, and during such dark times, humanity had longed for protectors, for a sanctuary. Noble families, desiring to maintain and enhance their power, created sanctuaries centered around a singular ideology. The hunters they produced helped humanity stave off extinction. But since they were challenging to train and always in short supply, each hunter bore tremendous responsibility. Consequently, rewards and power followed naturally. This focus on consistently producing strong humans was crucial for ensuring the security of humanity. As a result, the 10 families, including the Sacred Sword family, inevitably gained significant influence, which explained why they had so many grandmothers and felt the need to cultivate strong talents to solidify their positions. He knew his father was the son of the 4th grandmother, who had passed away, and among his siblings, his father was the 5th. He then observed Su Wang encouraging a child to keep moving forward, making him think about how busy Su Wang must be, caring for all those family members. Su Wang then addressed the gathering, announcing that the eldest lineage had been taken care of and it was time to focus on the second one. He called Xian forward and asked her if she was responsible for the thunderclap, to which she replied affirmatively. The adults reacted with shock, finding it impossible that Xian, merely a middle schooler, could cause such a phenomenon. They questioned how she could have achieved it. He noticed the adults' disbelief, but when Su Wang demanded silence, they stuttered their apologies, making him think that such feats were typical for his sister Xian. Su Wang then commended Xian, predicting that if she continued practicing the thunderclap at this pace, she would be the youngest after the second family head to master it. He expressed his hope that she would grow into a leader surpassing even him. Xian confidently responded that she would do her best. He was impressed by her ability to endure Su Wang's imposing presence, noting her composure was indeed remarkable. She glanced at him, causing him to look away in a sudden panic, wondering why she was looking at him. Su Wang noticed his reaction and commented that Xian's growth reminded him of recent news about a certain two-faced rascal. He wondered if Su Wang was referring to the demonic dueler Xiao Jiangjin, known to live in the same generation as his grandfather and considered an external hunter. He also knew Jiangjin was Handiel's mentor, having recognized Handiel's potential as a hunter. Excited, he thought there was no way he'd miss any developments, as Jiangjin was a character featured in the game's prologue. He recalled that the demonic dueler was drawn to Handiel while the latter was training behind the orphanage and had offered to take him as a disciple. That was how Handiel became his disciple. Once Handiel turned 17, he declared his intention to honor his master's reputation and not tarnish it as he descended from the mountains to enter Jumgang Academy, marking the end of the prologue. He mused that Handiel was probably undergoing rigorous training at the moment and expressed a desire to see him. However, unlike with Hanwell, he realized that interacting with Handiel could potentially alter the storyline. Suddenly, a man appeared shocked and asked Su Wang if it was true that the demonic dueler, Xiao Jiangjin, had taken on a disciple. Su Wang calmly confirmed it, adding that he had heard the disciple was 12 years old that year. He recalled the disciple's name was Kang Hanbiel, taken from an orphanage 2 years ago. Su Wang noted that since Jiangjin never liked being tied down to any family, it made sense he would choose a child with no connections as his disciple. The man queried whether their family members would end up competing with Jiangjin's disciple. Su Wang affirmed this, revealing that Jiangjin had expressed interest in seeing whose disciple was stronger, his or one from their family. Su Wang dismissed it as a childish and obvious provocation but admitted they couldn't just ignore it. He voiced his high expectations for those who would compete against Jiangjin's disciples, urging them to demonstrate their family's undeniable strength. Xian calmly assured Su Wang that she would meet his expectations, and other children stutteringly echoed her commitment. Following them, he also shouted his determination to meet the expectations, amazed that the demonic dueler had been challenging every major family, understanding now how Handiel had garnered so much attention from the noble houses upon his enrollment. A kid then slammed the table, and Xingwu stutteringly proclaimed that he would not just meet the expectations, but exceed them, as his father had taught him. Xingwu proudly shared that his father always said that even when a lion hunts a single rabbit, it must give its all. Inspired by his father's words, he vowed to exert his full effort in battle, regardless of the opponent. He smiled upon hearing Xingwu's words, thinking how Xingwu had been thoroughly defeated by Hanbiel, bringing disgrace to their family. Suddenly, Su Wang asked him what he found so amusing, startling him and Xingwu. Su Wang inquired why he was laughing and urged him to share the joke with everyone. Caught off guard and horrified, he hesitated for a moment. His parents were shocked, and his father tried to explain to Su Wang that Qunwu was merely in a good mood because of something he had eaten. However, Su Wang persisted, insisting that he wanted to hear the explanation directly from him, asking again why exactly he was laughing. Sweating with nervousness and unsure of how to respond, he stood up and addressed Su Wang. He admitted that he had indeed laughed because of what Xingwu had said, but clarified that he wasn't mocking the words themselves. Xingwu looked shocked by the admission, prompting Su Wang to question what exactly he meant. He posed a question to Su Wang, asking if a huge lion would really go all out to catch a single rabbit, and noted that it seemed odd to him because if a lion needs to exert maximum effort to catch one rabbit, it suggests the lion might be in trouble. If that was the case, then the lion was arguably done for. He explained that the confident way Xingwu had said it was what had made him laugh, and then he apologized for any misunderstanding. Suddenly, Su Wang burst into loud laughter, proclaiming that it was quite an unusual perspective. He mused that if the king of beasts has to go all out for just one rabbit, it probably does suggest that the lion's life is on the brink. He told him that he would ponder over his words, seeing them as a proverb that served as a reminder to always reflect on oneself and ensure they were not getting weaker. He reassured Su Wang that he was still in great shape and thanked him for his understanding, thinking to himself that he had somehow earned his grandfather's approval and decided to just roll with it, despite receiving serious glares from Xingwu and his parents. Su Wang then complimented him on his sharpness and expressed high expectations for him, which left him somewhat confused. Then, Su Wang seemed to recall that he had something important to announce to everyone, urging them to listen carefully. He announced that today's evaluation match would be held inside a gate, catching everyone off guard. Xion echoed in disbelief, asking if he truly meant a gate. Sangjin expressed concern, reminding Su Wang that there were still children among them, and another adult questioned the gate's difficulty level. Su Wang responded that for the descendants of the Sacred Sword family, white gates should be a breeze, revealing that the gate for the evaluation match would be of the yellow grade, which is the 3rd level. After the feast, they all headed to the yellow gate. He surveyed the imposing structure, doubting whether they were truly prepared for the challenge it represented, and wondered if they should proceed. Su Wang then checked if everyone was present or if they were still waiting for more people. He placed the key in the gate and issued a last call for anyone who might have changed their mind about joining the evaluation match. When no one responded, Su Wang declared that they would open the gate. As he turned the key, a strong, bright light and a gust of wind burst forth. He shielded his face from the intense wind, while Sangjin protectively held Yiyun from behind. As the wind subsided, he saw what lay inside the gate. The system notification confirmed his entry into the great jungle of the Chief Four. Su Wang announced that the evaluation was starting now, and the system displayed the instructions for their strategy, starting with descending a cliff. They were to follow the gate's notifications, break through the jungle, and reach a lake at the center. Pointing to it, Su Wang explained that a rank 3 monster, the chief, lived in the lake and rarely emerged from the water. He cautioned that while they might want to hunt it, they shouldn't attempt underwater combat with their current skill levels, much to the adults' relief. He too felt relieved, knowing that they weren't even High Academy students yet, and recognizing that fighting underwater would be overly ambitious. Su Wang further reassured them by explaining that the hunters had weakened the chief and sealed its ability to dive, leaving it barely able to stand at the water's edge. The adults cheered, relieved by this news. Su Wang then questioned if this setup should make the task relatively easy for them, but he remained silent, skeptical about the true difficulty of their mission. He noticed that it wasn't just the chief they had to worry about. The considerable distance to the lake also posed a challenge, prompting him to consider the stamina they would expend reaching their target. He realized that despite the assurances, the challenge ahead was no easy feat, and the difficulty was quite formidable. Su Wang, noticing his pensive silence, reassured everyone that there was no need for undue worry since hunters had already culled most of the dangerous monsters, and they were well prepared with the necessary equipment. A man handed Su Wang something that surprised him, a screen choker that allowed real-time observation and a device known as a gate watch, which could monitor their mana and pulse. Su Wang explained that these artifacts were critical for safety. If they encountered any trouble, the devices would help locate them instantly, allowing hunters to dispatch assistance promptly. He recalled seeing similar devices at the academy. Su Wang instructed them to wear these artifacts at all times during the evaluation match and to handle them with care to avoid damage. He further explained that the match would last 3 hours, and they should set their timers upon activation. Sangjin assisted him in putting on his device. Su Wang also mentioned that the participant who contributed most significantly to defeating the chief would receive a gate key, which they must hand over to a nearby hunter before leaving the area. After equipping their gate watches, Su Wang ordered them to line up at the edge of the cliff. Jaya expressed her concerns, advising him not to push himself too hard and to stay safe. Sangjin warned him against overconfidence due to his skills. He assured his parents that he would be cautious and return soon. Su Wang, observing their interactions, chuckled about how well everyone was getting along, noting that it was nice to receive his grandfather's attention, something he felt was rare before, while Seungwoo looked on with a scowl. When Su Wang signaled the start of the evaluation match, a man raised a gun, and at the sound of the shot, all the kids surged forward down the cliff. The system displayed a countdown, indicating 3 hours remaining until completion. While other kids panicked, some shouting about their fear and wanting to quit, asking how they were supposed to descend, he gripped the rope firmly, reassuring himself. He reminded himself that there was no need for fear. His instincts would guide his movements and help him avoid danger. He landed on a small stone and leaped again, channeling mana into his legs to absorb the shock of the fall. Once safely on the forest floor, a notification instructed him to break through the jungle and make his way to the chief's lake. Knowing that time was of the essence, he quickly set off through the dense undergrowth. Suddenly, he narrowly avoided an attack that whistled past his leg. Turning, he found himself facing 7 pocket apes, ranked .01. He eyed the apes, suspecting they were the culprits that had launched the attack by throwing objects. Observing the group, he noted that although numerous, they weren't particularly formidable adversaries. As one of the apes hurled a stone at him, he effortlessly dodged. Understanding that once they exhausted their supply of projectiles, they were merely aggressive primates. With his heightened evasion instincts, dodging them proved manageable. He prepared his sword, anticipating their next move. Once they ran out of ammunition, they would likely attempt to flee, and he preferred not to exhaust himself in a chase, opting instead for a counterattack. When the stone was about to hit him, he managed to hit it back, hitting the pocket ape. The situation escalated when an ape aggressively threw a rock directly at him. Calmly positioning his sword, he taunted them, questioning their aim. With a swift movement, he struck the stone with his sword, hurling it back at the attacker. The stone hit its mark, causing the ape to collapse to the ground. He couldn't help but grin, declaring it a home run, which left the remaining apes staring in horror. Moments later, a loud crash echoed through the jungle, signaling that he had successfully neutralized the threat. While he was pleased to have handled the situation, he realized with concern that he was running dangerously low on both stamina and mana. Furthermore, the lake was still a considerable distance away, and he had already spent 30 minutes of his allotted time. He continued walking through the jungle, questioning whether they really had a chance against the chief. As he pondered, his foot struck something on the ground. Looking down, he discovered a vitality fruit in the grasp of a fallen pocket ape. Known for its restorative properties, the fruit was favored by pocket apes and used in potion making, capable of restoring 50 health points upon consumption. He picked it up, recalling that such fruits were commonly found around pocket apes. From his past life, he also remembered a blue variant of the fruit. A smile spread across his face as he formulated a plan to survive the jungle's perils. Meanwhile, back at the cliff where the parents and other adults were observing the competition, Jaya overheard one of the mothers anxiously asking her husband if he thought their son might be dead. The husband reassured her that their son had likely used his mana just in time, which might have left him a bit dizzy, but he would be alright. The woman expressed concern that, even though the monsters were weakened, roaming in packs still posed a significant danger. Nearby, Bumjen inquired to Su Wang about Seungwoo's performance. Su Wang noted that while Seungwoo's execution of the White Mask movement was smooth, some actions were unnecessary, yet he was handling them wisely. Bumjen proudly exclaimed that it had only been a short while since they began training Seungwoo, but he was learning quickly. He suggested that Seungwoo's loss in the duel was due to Kyunwoo letting his guard down, a comment that left Sangjun and Jaya silently fuming. Suddenly, the spectators witnessed Xion executing the fifth form of the King of Beasts attack style, Lion's Blitz, a 4-strike combo that impressed everyone, including Xion's parents. Bumjen pointed out to Su Wang that Seungwoo was not backing down either. Su Wang acknowledged that Xion's skills had notably improved, recognizing the thunderclap, but he expressed concern about how much mana and stamina the kids were using, especially considering the upcoming battle with the chief. Bumjen assured Su Wang that Seungwoo would manage fine, to which Su Wang responded that they would see in due time. Just then, a loud noise erupted from the jungle, drawing everyone's attention. They saw Kyunwoo skillfully throwing an ape into the air and dispatching more apes with remarkable agility. Su Wang, puzzled, asked what Kyunwoo was doing. Sangjun and Jaya, both visibly anxious, responded that Kyunwoo was simply taking the evaluation match very seriously. On the ground, he ate the vitality fruit and confidently remarked that the challenge was proving to be easier than expected. As Sangjun watched his son with a mix of confusion and admiration, Jaya observed worriedly. However, Bumjen laughed dismissively, claiming he couldn't believe it and suggesting Kyunwoo had just come to play around. He urged everyone to watch their diligent Seungwoo instead, which irritated Sangjun and Jaya. Su Wang interjected, asking Bumjen if he had failed to notice that Kyunwoo was not only avoiding all the monster attacks, but also effectively counterattacking. He pointed out that all of Kyunwoo's counterattacks landed perfectly, demonstrating sharp intuition. Bumjen retorted that Kyunwoo wasn't taking things seriously and criticized him for recklessly picking and consuming unknown fruits. He even questioned Sangjun's methods of upbringing, which infuriated Sangjun. Su Wang then asked Bumjen whether his eyes were merely decorative or if he was having trouble with his brain, questioning if he really didn't recognize the fruit Kyunwoo had eaten. Upon closer inspection, Bumjen realized it was the fruit of endurance. Su Wang, with a smile, noted that Kyunwoo's confident consumption of the fruit indicated that Sangjun must have taught him well. However, Sangjun corrected him, stating he had never taught Kyunwoo about the fruits, it was all Kyunwoo's doing. Su Wang then gestured towards the screen, questioning if not Sangjun, then who could have taught him. They then saw Kyunwoo find and eat the fruit of energy. Su Wang commented that Kyunwoo seemed to understand the pocket apes well and appeared like a pro hunter adept at adapting in difficult situations. Sangjun agreed, though he knew he wasn't the one who had taught Kyunwoo about these fruits. Meanwhile, after defeating a swarm of apes, Kyunwoo confirmed his predictions about the various fruits. He discovered the fruit of energy, which had a dense texture and tasted somewhat like syrupy fever medicine. The system notified him that it restored 50 mana when consumed. Feeling revitalized and noticing the lake was now closed, He was pleased that he had recovered his stamina with the fruits. Kyunwoo then realized he had gathered quite a few fruits and wondered how to carry them. Not wanting to leave them behind for someone else to take, he noticed a pouch on a collapsed ape and had a brilliant idea. A moment later, he put the fruits into the pocket ape's fur pouch, a miscellaneous item that can store other objects but can only be used in dungeons and requires a mana stone for continued use. Knowing it might also be considered loot, but that such an opportunity wouldn't come twice, he acted quickly. He then plunged his sword into the ground and wrote instructions to give the ape pockets mana stones. Afterward, he leapt onto a tree, reasoning that if the apes had mana stones, their bodies would be sustained, allowing them to continue using the pouch. Deciding to run to the lake, he jumped from tree to tree, aware that the time spent collecting fruit meant he had to compensate by using his mana. Suddenly, he felt something approaching and blocked an object thrown at him by an ape, surprised that they were attempting to catch him. He then attacked them swiftly, knowing that subduing their leader was essential to save time and energy. After landing on the ground, he noticed the muddy terrain. He looked around, observing that the trees were shorter than before and the leaves wider, and noted the increased humidity, confirming the environmental change. He remembered that in the game, a change in the environment typically meant a change in the monsters that appeared. Soon after, he spotted a monster in front of him and realized they were Mudcaros, a relatively strong species. Frustratingly, there were 4 of them, and it was the only shortcut to the lake. Fighting there would be a challenge as the humid environment increased the Mudcaros' speed, and while the mucus from their mouths wasn't particularly strong, it posed a paralysis risk. He decided to look for an antidote first and recalled hearing about one near the Mudcaros' habitat. Telling himself to be cautious until he found it, he soon emerged from the bushes, frustrated from his aimless search. Suddenly, a bright light caught his attention, and he was excited when he finally found the antidote he was seeking, growing as expected around the Mudcaros' habitat. He picked the antidote, pondering whether his continual encounters with monsters were fortunate. He then realized he hadn't invested any stats in his luck. Deciding to consume the antidote immediately, the system notified him that he had consumed mud herb root, which increased his immunity by 11% for 30 minutes and informed him that repeated consumption would boost his immunity by 15%. He was disgusted when he ate the antidote, but then he heard someone shouting for something to go away. Surprised, he heard the voice again declare that if they could only move properly, they would all be dead. He peeked behind the tree, curious about who had encountered the monster, and saw that it was Ruddle Kiro, rank 2. He watched as Ruddle Kiro threw poison at the person and understood the danger they were in. He also knew that no matter how weak the poison was, they could only fight back if all their abilities were over 50. He then wondered if the person had been paralyzed, noting their awkward movements. He pondered what he should do and thought that if the situation became too dangerous, a hunter would save them, and he didn't have any reason to help his competitors. However, he was shocked to see Mudcaros attacking the person too, which was extremely dangerous, so he decided to help. He looked around for a high place and spotted a nearby cliff. He immediately jumped onto it, knowing that the monsters hadn't noticed him yet, and seized the moment. He then leaped from the cliff and headed toward the monsters, who all looked up. Confused, he attacked them with his Beast King style attack, 7th form, High Fall, which sent the monsters flying in different directions, leaving them dazed and collapsed. He sheathed his sword and approached the person to ask if they were okay and if they were hurt anywhere, reaching out to help them up. To his surprise, he saw that it was Seungwoo who, in shock, asked if he was Du Kyunwoo. He, too, was stunned into stone, shock. He couldn't believe it was Seungwoo and wondered why he had saved that brat. Seungwoo then shouted that even if he hadn't come, he could have handled it by himself and accused him of stealing his prey. He told Seungwoo that if that was the case, he was sorry. Seungwoo responded that if he was truly sorry, he should offer something as compensation. Pissed, he thought Seungwoo was the worst person ever and wondered what nonsense Seungwoo was spouting. Suddenly, the system appeared and showed that Mudcaro rank 1 had appeared. Seungwoo, shouting, asked why there was a monster again, and he calmly asked if one monster was left. Seungwoo, still shouting, demanded to know what he was doing and why he didn't handle them properly, making him snap in anger and sighingly tell Seungwoo that it couldn't be helped. He then sweetly told Seungwoo that he had left the monster for him, so he could handle it alone and now he wouldn't interrupt his deadly blow. He then ran away, telling Seungwoo he'd see him in class, making Seungwoo panic and shout for him to wait, but he just ran off, leaving Seungwoo with the monster glaring at him. Meanwhile, on the cliff, the adults heard Seungwoo cursing at Kyunwoo and shouting at Mudcaro not to come near him, which made his father, Bumjun, angry. The other adults teasingly asked how a lion could get kicked out by a toad. Bumjun then shouted to Su Wang that they needed to seize Kyunwoo and punish him right away because leaving Seungwoo, who was injured, was against the way of divine swordsmanship of the Du family. However, Su Wang just asked Sangjun what he thought about it. Sangjun replied that he thought it was something that commonly happens in competitions and he was sure the kids were well aware that hunters were waiting in case of emergencies, so he thought they were just playing around. Bumjun furiously asked Sangjun if he was kidding him right now, but Sangjun simply replied that even if Kyunwoo hadn't come to help, Seungwoo could have handled it by himself and asked Bumjun if he was wrong, leaving Bumjun unable to answer. Su Wang then put his hand on Sangjun's shoulder, telling Bumjun that Sangjun was right and that they couldn't stop the evaluation match and scold the child because of it. Sangjun then mentioned that Kyunwoo would appreciate it if he heard about this while Bumjun was fuming in anger. Su Wang then looked at the system, thinking that the matter was really interesting and, if his eyes weren't mistaken, it must be blue thunder around Kyunwoo. Su Wang knew it was deep in the forest so many people wouldn't notice, but he was sure it was blue thunder, making him wonder how Kyunwoo could do it. Back in the jungle, he was catching his breath in a tree, wondering if the jungle was coming to an end because he noticed changes in the surroundings again. He then felt a refreshing breeze and was surprised to see a lake very close by when he looked up. The system then indicated that he had reached the next stage and his mission was to subjugate the spirit monster in the lake. He was relieved to have arrived safely and noticed that there were about 5 of them, including him, but also saw that everyone seemed inexperienced in underwater combat. He then noticed someone in the middle of the lake, making him wonder who it was. On closer inspection, it was Du Xian. He noticed that she was really fast, but he was puzzled by her heading towards a seemingly empty area. His horror grew when he spotted the spirit monster and noticed its poor condition, making him wonder if the hunters had drained its energy earlier, and if Xian could take it down with her current momentum. The Chief 4 monster screamed in anger and called for reinforcements, making him realize that Xian would be in danger. Xian jumped away but winced in pain when she realized her leg couldn't move. He rushed towards the lake, realizing the gravity of the situation, and noticed by Xian's strange movements that she was also paralyzed. He looked at his sword, wondering if he could face the spirit monster alone with Xian in such a condition. He knew that with his gift, he could dodge all their attacks, but it would quickly deplete his stamina and mana. He then looked at his other cousins and thought he should cooperate with Xian's acquaintances, but wondered if they would listen to him. He then grabbed a fruit from his fur pocket, decided to stock up on stamina, and began formulating a plan. He then realized something as he looked at the fruit, thinking it might be possible. On the other hand, Xian felt unable to move her shoulder and her left leg, making her wonder if it was a paralysis effect. She knew that in her body's current state, she couldn't approach any closer. The monsters then jumped towards her, making her wonder if retreating was her only option. Forcing herself to stand, she reminded herself of how far she had come. She then exhaled to calm herself down and dashed towards the monsters. She threw water at the monsters, which blinded them, and swung her sword using her Beast King style 6th form, Lion Riot Dance, easily slashing them in half. She then looked behind her to attack the other monsters, but just as she was about to strike, she couldn't move her body. The monsters leapt at her while she wondered why she felt so paralyzed. Attacking them was difficult with her injured hand, making her realize she was in danger. Suddenly, she heard him telling her that he'd attack on the right and she should take the left. She immediately looked to her left and attacked the monster on her side, noticing her body moved at the command of his voice. She then looked at the person who had commanded her because she moved exactly as he had said. She was then surprised to see that it was Du Kyunwoo, the rabbit. He walked closer to her while respectfully calling her and asked if she could cooperate with him. She asked him if by cooperate he meant working together, to which he replied affirmatively. He wondered aloud if it was because she had turned 14 that she looked quite young, as he remembered her differently. She then suggested that they should not talk there and move somewhere else to discuss further. Meanwhile, on the cliff, the adults noticed that everyone was having a hard time. They observed that even though the chief monster was weakened, it still seemed overwhelming for the kids, especially since they lacked experience in fighting on the surface of the water. The adults also pointed out that the presence of so many monsters made it hard to even approach the chief. Su Wang noticed the dropping morale of the kids, and then Du Wujun, the eldest son of the Sacred Word family, told Su Wang that the children seemed to be in poor condition and suggested that they should lower the difficulty. Wujun explained that it wasn't that the kids were weak, but given their current state, adjusting the situation seemed wise, which the other parents agreed with. Su Wang thought for a moment, considering that maybe it was too much for them given their ages. With the oldest being 17, they had done quite well. However, he was concerned about Jugui Seo Jiangjin, knowing that if Hanbiol was the disciple of Jiangjin, Hanbiol was bound to be an even more formidable opponent. Su Wang really didn't want to see his grandchildren lose to that rascal's disciple, but he thought he might have overestimated Jiangjin. Wujun then urged him to consider lowering the difficulty, and Su Wang agreed that perhaps it was for the best. Just as Su Wang was about to agree to lower the difficulty of the evaluation match, he paused when he heard someone suggest that they should work together. He saw Kyunwoo telling everyone that they should stick with him. Su Wang smiled upon hearing this and told the adults that the kids seemed to have something in mind, so they should wait and see what they planned to do. Kyunwoo's cousins asked him what he meant by cooperation, and although they acknowledged that Xian had the skills, and they could accept following her lead, They wondered why they should trust Kyunwoo with it. They agreed that cooperation was the right thing to do, but helping him get close to the chief didn't sit right with them. They then asked him why he was acting so cocky when he was so young, and if he thought that just because he had beaten Seungwoo, they would see him in a different light. They acknowledged that they did see him differently, but it didn't mean he could be their equal, which made him feel distracted and pissed because they were as stubborn as ever. However, he was surprised when Xian told everyone that she agreed with Kyunwoo because, indeed, she couldn't face them alone and Kyunwoo had something they needed. He hadn't expected Xian to side with him and thought it was a good thing he had given her the vitality fruit earlier. Their cousins asked her why, and turned to him to ask what exactly he had with him. He smiled upon hearing this and threw the fruits and healing items in front of them. He then told them that he wasn't asking them to help him for free. If they cooperated with him, he would give them those healing items. He then asked them if they wouldn't all like a boost. One of his cousins asked him how he planned to fight the chief, but he simply retorted, asking who would if not him. He then challenged them to look at themselves and asked if any of them had the strength to keep going. He also pointed out that they were all thinking that if only they had more stamina, more mana, or weren't paralyzed, they could have performed better, which left everyone shocked. He then gave them the fruits and told them to take those to regain their strength and show the adults watching them that they were not an embarrassment. He also mentioned that there wasn't much time left, and they couldn't just end on a weak note, therefore, they should stick with him and work together. The system then showed them that they only had 52 minutes to complete the mission. He was checking the system, thinking that everyone was a bit recovered when someone shouted his name. When he looked back, he saw Seungwoo and couldn't believe that Seungwoo was still alive. He smiled at him, making Seungwoo angrily ask him what was with his annoying expression. But he just offered the fruit to Seungwoo and asked if he wanted to cooperate too. Seungwoo snatched the fruit from him, making him annoyed. But he thought that even though he really didn't like it, the more allies he had, the better. He then called everyone to listen and asked if he was right that they had recovered a bit. He then stared at them seriously and told them that they should let him explain the plan. After that, he told Xian that she would cover the chief's right side and he would take the left. She replied that she got it, but asked if she had to be on the right side. He explained that it was because she was stronger than him, knowing that the chief's left arm was severed and not as well defended, which is why it was better for her to keep the right arm in check. He then told everyone that it was time to begin, and the system issued a warning that they had encountered the chief, rank 3, along with 17 bosses ranked 1. They all rushed towards the chief, and he instructed Seok-woo to take command of the minions, explaining that he and Xian needed to focus on the chief and couldn't assist him. Seok-woo acknowledged the command, saying he understood and would provide support from behind. He then directed the others to separate to the left and right, emphasizing that their priority was to clear a path. On the other hand, he told Xian that they should move out, and then they ran to their respective sides. The chief screamed in anger and furiously denounced them as mere humans. It then charged up power in its hand while challenging their audacity to confront the ruler of the lake. The chief created a sharp weapon from water and, shouting at them, declared it would eliminate all of them, calling them pathetic humans. It then launched the weapon in Xian's direction, catching her by surprise. Fortunately, she jumped away in time to dodge it. She then activated her Beast King offensive style third form and slashed the chief with her Lion Iron Split technique. When she landed back in the water, Kyunwoo rushed behind the chief, and upon reaching the other side, he activated his Beast King offensive style first form and attacked the chief with his Lion's Fury technique, but the chief dodged it. Both were surprised that it dodged his attack. The chief then glared at them angrily, and they noticed its tails moving, realizing that it seamlessly switched between attack and defense, making it difficult for them to approach. Nonetheless, they both rushed at it again, knowing they had the advantage and that there was no need to hurry. They continuously attacked the chief together without pausing, and a few minutes later, the chief was catching its breath, clearly exhausted. He nodded at Xian, signaling that it was their chance because the chief was getting weaker, and she nodded back in agreement. They both dashed toward it and used their Beast King offensive style second form, the Lion Claw Mark technique, to attack it together. He asked her if she managed to cut it, and she replied that it was a shallow cut. He commented that its hide was darn tough, but she corrected him, stating it was not hide, but scale. He replied that it was the same thing. He then smiled, noticing that the wound from the lion's claw mark was healing slowly and bleeding heavily, signaling that they just needed to hold out and rank 3 would be theirs. Suddenly, the chief attacked him with its tail, which he dodged while Xian shouted to him not to let his guard down. The chief glared at them, calling them damn rats, and remarked that if her arm were still intact, they wouldn't stand a chance. It then swung its tail in his direction while shouting that she'd tear him apart first. But before it could strike him, Xian slashed it from behind and taunted it, asking where it was looking since she was cautious just a moment ago. The chief screamed in pain and shouted that she wouldn't die like this. The chief then slammed her tail on the lake, declaring that even if she died, she would drag them all with her. He managed to use his Beast King defensive style third form, Lion's Barrier to protect himself. They both ran toward the chief to attack again. Su Wang noticed how well Qunwu and Xian were coordinated and laughingly remarked that he now understood why Qunwu could defeat Seungwoo. Bumjun, in anger, wondered how Qunwu could fight at a level similar to Xian. Suddenly, someone pointed to the system, shouting for everyone to look at it, and they were all surprised to see Xian activating her blue thunder. Su Wang proudly declared that the signs were already there and it had finally happened. But his attention snapped back to the system when someone stutteringly urged everyone to look again. They then saw Qunwu trying to calm his breathing, correct his posture, and achieve complete unity with his sword. He maximized his senses and perfected the activation of his mana circuit, gaining an acute understanding of everything around him. The adults were in shock and could scarcely believe what they were witnessing. Even Su Wang was stunned when he saw Qunwu trigger the blue thunder as well. Recognizing the threat, the chief knew it had to dodge as Qunwu and Xian activated their Beast King offensive style 5th form. In a panic, the chief realized it needed to evade their attacks, but when they both struck with their lion onslaught technique, the chief saw the lion appear larger than herself. Together, they defeated the chief with their special technique. The notification then showed everyone that they had cleared the gate, and a gate exit would be created around the gate key. Su Wang and the others sat in silent disbelief until Su Wang broke the silence with a laugh, saying it wasn't just one. Turning back to the system, Su Wang remarked that all this time he thought Qunwu was just a mere rabbit, but it turned out Qunwu was a lion cub instead. When he saw the notification, he was relieved that it was finally over. Xian praised him for his excellent performance, and he returned the compliment. He remembered that in the game, achieving certain feats or receiving particular evaluations from people could earn him titles, but he was surprised to receive 2 titles simultaneously. One of them was Lion Cub, and the pronunciation in Korean humorously resembled cursing, making him wonder about the nature of the title. However, he was pleased to see that the adults who were watching had changed their opinion of him, and he even received recognition from his grandfather. He knew it had been a long time since anyone had shown interest in him, who had previously failed to even catch a measly rabbit, and his grandfather had distanced himself from him. The notification then asked him if he would like to replace the title Rabbit with Lion Cub. He pondered whether it was a title that boosted the effect of the Beast King style by 10%, but he realized that changing it would mean he could no longer use Rabbit, the symbol of Duke Qunwu. Additionally, he knew that replacing it, with his luck stat of 25, would significantly drop his evasion rate, which was crucial since most of his combat style leveraged his evasion instinct. He couldn't afford to lose this, so he stared at the notification, realizing there was no other choice. After all, nothing could compare to a rabbit. As he was about to click no, busy thinking that Lion Cub is better used when he needs extra strength or at family gatherings, Xian asked him if he was looking at the message that the gate had been cleared. He tried to say he was, but she shook her head and told him that he seemed to have been staring into space for quite a while. He acknowledged her observation and admitted he was reviewing the messages they received from clearing the gate, noting that he could only see the effects of the titles. She expressed her understanding and suggested he take the key. She explained that it was the gate key and it had fallen to her after they took down the boss monster. He remarked that it meant the gate recognized her as the one who contributed the most and asked her why she was offering it to him. She replied that if he hadn't suggested they team up, they wouldn't have been able to clear the gate. She confessed that she didn't know what the gate thought, but she believed differently, which was why she was giving him the key. She then smiled, thanking him and telling him that it was all because of him. He accepted the key, stunned and bashful. Suddenly, someone appeared behind them, causing both to turn around. The man congratulated them on clearing the gate, and he noticed that the man was wearing Regulus clan attire, indicating he was a hunter serving their family. The man then informed them that if they handed over the gate key, he would deliver it to the family head. Remembering that it was agreed to hand over the gate key to a nearby hunter after clearing the gate, he gave the key to the man. The man confirmed receipt of the gate key and mentioned he would also report that Xian and he had played key roles in the gate's clearance. He then asked the man about the dead body of the Chief 4. The man explained that, as they knew, loot obtained from the evaluation battles was usually owned by the family. However, in this case, it seemed wise to make an inquiry to their master, Su Wang. The man relayed the inquiry to Su Wang, who responded that the spoils belonged to the winner. The man relayed that Su Wang had approved and that ownership of the loot belonged to the party who defeated the monster. He excitedly replied that it was great and they would take the boss's loot. He told Xian that since she also fought, they could share, but she declined, surprising him. He asked her if she really meant it, and she affirmed, telling him that he could have it. Gratefully, he thanked her and approached the dead Chief 4, asserting that he would keep it. He knew there was no way he would leave the boss's body floating around there, especially since the boss was ranked 3. He then found the crystal and, as expected, the magic stone was of high quality because it was from a rank 3 boss. But then, he noticed more shiny objects in the water. He quickly picked them up and was shocked to find that it was an intermediate physical ability magic stone. Upon absorption, he received 1 bonus point that could only be used to enhance physical stats if they were under 80. He was in shock, realizing the rarity of finding a magic stone that allowed him to choose which stat to enhance, especially since it was of intermediate level. Deciding to save it for when it was most needed, since physical stats above 70 are difficult to improve, he told Xian that he really owed her one. She appeared confused at first but then mentioned that magic stones were extremely rare, and suggested they have it appraised outside, which he agreed to. She then congratulated him on being able to use the Blue Thunder, admitting she meant to say it earlier but had forgotten. He thanked her and told her that she was also impressive. He shyly smiled and suggested that they should head back as well. Upon their return, Su Wang happily and proudly praised everyone for doing a great job, especially mentioning Xian and him for their impressive skills. He also told them that they had broken the record set by the second family head while they were being treated, making him wonder if it was his triggering of the Blue Thunder that had Su Wang looking so pleased today. Su Wang then put his hand on his head and patted them both, advising them not to become complacent but to continue striving humbly and tirelessly. Initially surprised, he smiled warmly, feeling gratified to be acknowledged by Su Wang. The notification then once again asked him if he would like to replace the title rabbit with lion cub. He looked at the yes option, thinking it might be an opportunity he should seize, and considered asking Su Wang for a favor. He then approached Su Wang, stating he had a request. Su Wang, intrigued, urged him to speak up. He boldly asked Su Wang for permission to enter the treasury of the Divine Sword Du family, which left Su Wang surprised and asking if he had indeed mentioned the treasury. A moment later, as they followed Su Wang, he turned around, remembering he had said it was okay if they wanted him to guide them there, but he wondered why everyone was following. Sangjun then praised him for his performance and mentioned that he had watched from the cliff, affirming that he seemed to have mastered the Blue Thunder. However, Sangjun then seriously inquired how he knew about the fruits, with Jaya looking at him angrily. Sangjun cautioned him that while it was okay to know what he was eating, he should be careful about consuming anything without checking, as some plants and animals that appear similar in the gate can be entirely different. Jaya then asked, somewhat angrily, what he would do if he ate something harmful and got sick or poisoned, while Yi Yun excitedly expressed her desire to try some fruit too. He simply replied yes, unable to admit his ability to sense things. He noticed Xian watching the exchange and asked her what was wrong. She commented that he seemed to get along well with his family, to which he asked if it wasn't the same for her. She responded that they were just so-so, making him guess that her newfound openness with him stemmed from their fighting together. Su Wang then announced that they had arrived and explained that most of the treasures kept at the main house were connected to the history of the Divine Swordsmith family and represented the clan's heritage. He noted that throughout history, only a few people besides the head of the family had been permitted to enter the treasury. Su Wang then opened the door, telling them that they would now be among those few. They entered the treasury, both amazed by the ambience despite the sparse collection of treasures. She asked him if he wanted to take a closer look, to which he enthusiastically agreed. As he surveyed the room, he noted the generous condition allowing them to take any one item suitable for their level. The Elixir Thunder, known for significantly enhancing lightning-related abilities, was tempting, but he pondered the rarity of this opportunity to access the family treasury and decided not to choose a treasure that could be found elsewhere. His gaze then fell on the Blue Gate Key, making him wonder if it was the same Blue Gate Key that Kang Hanbiel had acquired in the game, known for its rarity even there. She pointed towards the front, indicating there was another room in the back. Walking closer, she suggested they check it out. He followed, noting their efficient use of space. As they entered the back room, both were shocked to see a lot of swords, with a shining sword in the middle catching their attention. He recognized it as the Sword of the Beast King, symbolizing the right to lead the Divine Swordsmith family. Each sword displayed was of high rank. He pointed to a sword on the ground, identifying it as the Beastmith's sword, a one-handed weapon perfectly suited for Xian. He recalled from the game that Xian had once possessed it, guessing this was where she obtained it. Observing her enamored with the sword, he remembered hearing that one could instinctively recognize a weapon that suited them just by looking at it, wondering if Xian felt a connection to this sword. He picked it up, mentioning how converting mana into beast droplets seemed like a good match with her Blue Thunder, and it was a sword that anyone who practiced the Beast King style would find appealing. She looked at him sadly and asked if he was going to choose it. He replied no, explaining that unlike her, his mana capacity was limited, and the Beastmith's sword didn't seem like a good match for him. He also felt he couldn't take what was destined for Xian. Handing it to her, he told her he actually thought the Beastmith's sword would suit her better. She accepted it with a smile, telling him she really liked it. He teased that the name Lightning Flower didn't seem fitting for Xian's response and told her if she was grateful, she needed to take care of it, and if the Academy City or his family needed help, she should assist. She agreed, promising that as long as it was within her capabilities, she would help him anytime. He asked if it was a promise, and she confirmed it was. She then inquired about his own choice, offering to search for a sword together. He declined, saying he had already found his choice. Walking towards it, he grasped the sword, confident he had found the right one for him. He was surprised by the sensation he felt when he picked up the sword, making him wonder if Xian had experienced the same. It felt as though only the sword and he existed in that world. He pondered whether the sword was calling to him or if he was the one drawn to it. Slowly, he drew the sword from its sheath, certain that it was the only one meant for him, the Azure Sword. The system then displayed that the Azure Sword was a one-handed weapon, favored by Du Minjin, the second head of the Divine Swordsmith family. Forged by quenching the Horn of the Thunder Beast for 100 days, it was unique in the world and known to test its master. Its effects included a bonus of +3 to health and agility and, when equipped, it transformed into a reverse-edged sword. Additionally, all skills named Beast King style increased by 1 level when this sword was equipped, elevating the mastery of the Beast King style, potentially rivaling the Beast Mist sword. Most importantly, its reverse-edged mode symbolized Du Qunwu's vulnerability. He mused that he wasn't upholding the same pacifist values as Du Qunwu from the game, but he preferred not to kill unless absolutely necessary. He chuckled, slightly unnerved, knowing that the Azure Sword would allow him to handle adversaries without lethal force, yet he was aware that he must be careful not to strike any vital spots accidentally. He then informed Xian that they had made their choices and should leave, to which she agreed, mentioning that everyone was waiting outside. As they exited the treasury, Su Wang noticed that they had chosen the Beast Mist sword and the Azure Sword, both excellent selections. He handed the swords back to them with a reminder that both were favored by the family's second head and should be treated with care. They both thanked Su Wang for his trust and guidance. Holding his new sword, he called out to Su Wang, expressing his joy at having a new sword and seeing him after so long. Curious, he asked if Su Wang could teach him some of his sword techniques. The request left the other adults in shock and horror. Su Wang, however, was pleased and asked if he wanted lessons from his grandfather. He confirmed that he had never shared his sword skills with him before but agreed, stating there was nothing he wouldn't do for his grandchild's enlightenment. Given the late hour and the exhausting day at the gate, Su Wang suggested they start the lessons the next morning. Grateful, he bowed and thanked Su Wang, smiling at the prospect of gaining new courage from this experience. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 3 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.